The first thing the Natron Soda Flats Basin gives you is a pale white glare, soft as ash, spread across the floor of a quiet rift valley. Settle in and let the day loosen its hold on you. We are not hurrying toward this place, and we are not trying to solve it quickly, because the basin keeps its strangeness in slow layers, in salt, in heat, in water that arrives quietly and leaves almost everything behind. You can feel the air before you understand the landscape. It is warm, dry, and faintly mineral, with a taste like stone dust resting on the tongue. Around us the flats lie open beneath a wide sky, and the surface seems almost too pale to belong to the earth. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is strange because it gathers ordinary things, rain, rock, sun, and time, then turns them into something that feels distant and otherworldly. We come to it gently, as if walking at the edge of sleep. Under your feet, the ground is not quite sand and not quite stone. It has a crusted softness, a brittle skin, a powdery brightness where evaporated minerals have gathered into thin plates and shallow ridges. The wind moves over it with almost no sound, and when it does speak, it carries a dry whisper, like paper being folded far away. Far beyond the flats, the rift walls rise in quiet brown and purple tones. They do not crowd the basin, they simply hold it. The whole place rests inside a long geological opening, part of the East African rift, where the land has been slowly pulling apart for millions of years. That slow separation gives the basin its shape, its heat, its springs, and its deep sense of waiting. As we stand here together, you may notice how still the water looks when it appears. Lake Natron can spread thinly across the basin, or draw back and leave broad shining flats behind. Its edges shift with season and rainfall. Sometimes the lake is a mirror, sometimes it is a red, pink, white and silver mosaic, broken by islands of mineral crust and dark, wet sediment. The strangeness begins with water, though there is never much of it. Rain falls on the surrounding highlands, and small rivers and seasonal streams bring that water down toward the lowest part of the basin. They carry dissolved minerals from volcanic rocks along the way. The water comes in quietly, but in this hot, dry place, it has almost no easy path out again. So it waits under the sun. Here, evaporation is one of the great makers of the landscape. You can imagine the lake breathing upward all day, its surface giving itself back to the air. Water leaves as vapor, light and invisible, while salts and carbonates remain below. Over time, those leftovers become concentrated until the lake is no longer simply water, but a strong alkaline solution, bright with sodium carbonate and related minerals. That is where the name begins to feel right. Natron is a naturally occurring mixture rich in sodium carbonate, and in this basin it forms because volcanic geology, scarce rainfall, and powerful evaporation meet in the same closed bowl. Nothing about it needs hurry. Grain by grain, season by season, the basin concentrates itself, becoming stranger the longer you look. The water can be so alkaline that it feels less like ordinary lake water in the mind, and more like a quiet chemical memory of the rocks around it. We do not need to make it frightening. We only need to notice how unusual it is. The basin is not hostile. It is simply precise. It follows the rules of heat, minerals, drainage, and time, and the result is a place that seems painted from another planet. As the light softens over the Natron Soda Flats Basin, the colors begin to shift. White crusts hold the last brightness. Shallow pools darken toward rose and rust. The distant slopes turn blue at their bases, then violet, then nearly gray. You can feel the heat leaving the ground slowly, as if the basin has been holding the sun all day and is reluctant to let it go. If you listen closely, there is a very thin silence here. It is not empty silence. It has texture. It holds the faint tick of cooling salt, the hush of wind across crust, the soft movement of water at a shallow edge. There may be birds far away, their calls thinned by distance. There may be a faint mineral smell rising from damp places, sharp and clean, like wet stone mixed with sun. And as we move more deeply into the basin's quiet, the surface under us begins to tell the first part of its story. The flats are not smooth in a simple way. They are patterned with pans, ridges, plates, curls, and broken tiles of evaporite minerals. Some areas look chalky, some look glassy, some seem dusted with pale flour, others hold darker mud beneath a brittle lid. When your foot rests near the edge of a salt crust, you can imagine how fragile the surface is. It forms from water that once spread thinly here, then retreated into the air. As that water vanished, crystals grew. They joined each other in pale skins and rough mats, making a temporary floor that may crack, dissolve, and reform with the next wet season. The basin is always remaking its own skin. This is one reason the Natron Soda Flats Basin feels so strange. It looks still, but its stillness is active. The changes are slow enough to soothe the eye, yet constant enough to keep the place alive. A little rain can blur an edge. A few weeks of sun can sharpen it again. A shallow pool can become a mirror, then a slick of brine, then a field of crystals. The chemistry here is not hidden far below the ground. It is visible on the surface. Sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, and other dissolved salts come out of solution as evaporation concentrates the water. They gather along shorelines and low places. They whiten the flats. They give the basin that pale, lunar feeling, though everything here belongs completely to Earth. The surrounding volcanoes and highlands matter deeply. Lengai, rising south of Lake Natron, is one of the most unusual volcanoes on the planet, known for rare carbonatite lava that is rich in carbonate minerals. We do not need to climb it tonight. We only need to know that the basin lies in a volcanic neighborhood, where unusual rocks and waters have long been speaking to each other. Those volcanic materials weather under rain and heat. Minerals dissolve and travel. Streams bring them downward. Springs add their own chemistry from underground roots. The basin receives these gifts patiently, the way a shallow bowl receives whatever falls into it. Then the sun does the rest. It lifts the water away and leaves the mineral story behind in pale, delicate layers. You may notice that this strangeness is not loud. It does not announce itself with cliffs or crashing surf. It asks you to look at subtle surfaces, a rim of white around a pool, a red flush beneath still water, a cracked plate curling at the edge like old paint, a satin sheen where brine has dried to a film. These are quiet signs, but they are everywhere. The light here can feel almost weightless. During the day, brightness spreads across the soda flats until distance seems flattened and the horizon looks suspended. Later, as evening comes, the glare softens into pearl and silver. The ground stops shining so sharply, and the basin becomes easier to enter with the eyes. You can rest your attention on one pale ridge and let everything else fade. Below this first surface of salt and light, the Natron Soda Flats Basin changes again, and we begin to notice the shallow waters that gather and withdraw across it. They are not deep waters. They do not need to be. Their power comes from thinness, concentration, and patience. In some seasons, water spreads broadly, shallow enough to hold sky and minerals in the same trembling sheet. When you look across those flats, the lake can seem endless and barely present. A thin layer of water reflects clouds so clearly that it becomes difficult to tell where the basin ends and the air begins. Then a wind moves over it, and the mirror breaks into 1,000 soft pieces. The reflected sky becomes rippled silver. The far shore wavers like something remembered from a dream. The water's color is part of the mystery. At times, Lake Natron and its soda flats show shades of red, pink, orange, and deep brown. These colors often come from microorganisms that thrive in alkaline, salty conditions. Cyanobacteria and other salt-loving life can bloom in the brines, using sunlight and chemistry in ways that turn the shallow water into a living wash of color. You are not looking at lifeless water, even when it seems too strange for life. You are looking at a place where life has narrowed itself to fit the conditions. The organisms here do not need lushness. They do not need shade, deep soil, or softness. They live in thin water, strong sunlight, high alkalinity, and heavy mineral concentration, and they make color from that difficult simplicity. There is something peaceful in that thought. Life does not always arrive as forests or reefs or flowering meadows. Sometimes it arrives as a red film in brine. Sometimes it is a greenish sheen under a crust. Sometimes it is so small that you can only see its presence in the color it leaves behind. The Natron Soda Flats Basin teaches us to lower our expectations until they become more tender. The smell near the water can be different from the open flats. It may carry damp mineral notes, warm mud, salt, and a faint alkaline sharpness. The air feels closer to the skin there. The ground may darken under a thin glaze of brine. If you crouch in imagination at the water's edge, you can see tiny textures, soft bubbles, slick surfaces, and pale crystals beginning to gather. The basin's water is often described by its alkalinity, and that word can sound hard at first. But we can let it become simple. Alkaline water has a high pH, shaped here by dissolved carbonates from the volcanic landscape. Because the basin is closed, those materials are not easily flushed away. They accumulate, and the lake becomes chemically intense in a slow, steady way. That intensity affects almost everything. It shapes which organisms can live here. It shapes the minerals that form as water evaporates. It shapes the smell of the shoreline and the feel of the crusted ground. It even shapes the way light returns to your eyes, because colored microorganisms, white evaporites, dark mud and shallow reflective water all meet in one wide, quiet basin. And still, the place does not feel busy. Its activity is spread thinly across distance and time. You can stand at the edge of a pool and sense changes happening too slowly to see. Water evaporates, crystals form, microbes grow, sediment settles, heat rises, wind moves a veil of dust from one pale patch to another. Everything is doing something, but nothing insists on your attention. As we drift farther across this shallow world, the animals begin to appear as part of the basin's quiet pattern. The most famous are the lesser flamingos, which gather here in extraordinary numbers when conditions allow. They come because the strange water supports the cyanobacteria they feed on. In a place that might seem spare at first glance, a whole pink gathering can rise from microscopic life. Picture them from a respectful distance, not as a spectacle, but as soft movement on the pale flats. Their bodies are reflected in shallow water. Their legs make delicate lines. Their bills move through the surface as they filter food from the brine. The sound of them may drift across the basin as a low murmur, carried and thinned by warm air. The flamingos belong to the strangeness of the Natron Soda Flats Basin because they turn chemistry into grace. Volcanic rock becomes dissolved mineral. Dissolved mineral helps shape alkaline water. Alkaline water supports cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria feeds birds that move over the flats like living color. The chain is not dramatic. It is patient. It is almost musical in its quiet order. You can imagine standing with me as the birds shift slowly in the distance. We do not approach them. We simply watch the basin hold them. The soda flats, the shallow brine, the pale crusts and the pink birds all seem improbable together, yet each one explains the next. The landscape is strange because its pieces are unusual, but also because they fit so gently. The flamingos nest on islands and flats where the chemical waters can limit many disturbances. Mud nests rise like small cones from the surface, made from the very material of the basin. The birds use what the place offers. They do not soften it into something else. They accept its heat, its mineral water, its glare, and its quiet distances, and in that acceptance, the basin becomes a cradle. There is comfort in how specialized this world is. Not everything has to be welcoming to everything. Some places are narrow and exact, and life comes to them in narrow, exact forms. You may feel that as a kind of permission. The basin does not try to be a meadow, a forest, or a clear blue lake. It rests as itself, and what belongs here finds its way. The colors deepen as we keep watching. Pink birds, red water, white crust, black volcanic slopes, and yellow grasses at the basin's edge all settle into evening. The heat loosens. The wind becomes smoother. The wide sky gathers a faint violet tone. Your breathing can slow with the landscape. Mine does too, as we let the strange basin become familiar by simply staying with it. And as the water thins behind us and the flats widen again, we move toward the older forces underneath the scene, where the rift valley itself gives the basin its long, open shape. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is not just a lake bed, it is a resting place inside a moving continent, where deep geological tension has made room for water, heat, minerals, and silence. The East African Rift is a vast zone where the Earth's crust has been stretching and breaking over immense spans of time. The motion is slow beyond ordinary feeling. You could sit through a whole night, a whole year, a whole human life, and never feel it move beneath you. Yet over millions of years, that patient opening has lowered basins, raised shoulders of land, and guided volcanic activity. Here, slowness becomes architecture. Faults help shape the valley. Highlands gather rain. Lava and ash add minerals to the surrounding slopes. Springs find paths through warm underground rock. Streams follow gravity down into the basin. Then the closed lowland keeps what arrives, because there is no easy river carrying everything away to the sea. When you think of strangeness, you may imagine something sudden or unexplained. But the Natron Soda Flats Basin is strange in the opposite way. It is strange because it is so fully explained by slow causes. Each part makes sense, and still the whole feels dreamlike. The more gently we understand it, the more unusual it becomes. You can feel that in the shape of the land. The basin is broad and low, held between rougher, darker margins. The edges may carry grasses, scrub, volcanic rock and dusty paths, while the center opens into salt, brine and light. It feels like moving from a world of texture into a world of essence, where water and mineral have reduced the landscape to a few quiet elements. The rift gives the place a sense of depth, even though the lake itself is shallow. There is depth in the time beneath it. There is depth in the fractured crust, in the volcanic history, in the buried layers of sediment and evaporite. We are not descending through water here, but we are still descending, through explanation, through sensation, through the long memory of land. Warm springs may enter the lake with dissolved minerals of their own. They rise from underground roots, where water has passed through rock and taken chemistry into itself. When spring water meets the alkaline basin, it joins a system already rich and concentrated. The surface may show subtle differences where fresher inflows arrive, small changes in color, temperature, and texture. If you were to place your hand near one of those warm inlets in imagination, you might notice the contrast. The air is dry, but the spring edge is damp. The mineral smell is stronger. The mud feels softer. The water may carry heat from below, not fierce, just present, like a memory of the Earth's interior reaching the surface with no need to hurry. This is how the basin gathers worlds together. It has the sky world of glare and reflection. It has the water world of brine and microbial color. It has the rock world of rift faults and volcanic minerals. It has the living world of birds and microscopic food. Each one is quiet alone, but together they make a place that seems almost too carefully arranged. The strangeness is also visual. Soda flats often create patterns that feel deliberate, though no hand has designed them. Polygons form where drying crusts shrink and crack. Pale ridges trace old shorelines. Dark patches mark damp sediment beneath mineral skins. Around shallow pools, rings of white and tan may show where the water stood, then lowered, then stood again. You can let your eyes follow those lines without needing to name every mineral. A curved edge becomes a shoreline memory. A cracked sheet becomes a record of drying. A white bloom becomes evaporation made visible. The landscape writes in surfaces, and tonight we are reading it slowly, not to finish, but to stay near the feeling of an ancient place making itself. As evening settles, the basin becomes less sharp. The flats still hold light, but not glare. The rift walls become larger in the dimness, and the sky seems to lean closer. There is a tender coolness beginning in the air, though the ground still gives back warmth. The smell of dust and mineral water hangs low, and the whole basin feels like it is exhaling. Below this understanding of shape and stone, we come back to the surface again, because the surface is where the Natron Soda Flats Basin reveals its quietest transformations. The crust underfoot is temporary, the colors are temporary. Even the edge of the water is temporary. What seems fixed from a distance is, up close, a slow exchange between arrival and disappearance. A small pool may begin as rain or river water resting in a depression. It may dissolve salts already waiting in the ground. It may become cloudy with suspended sediment. It may warm under the sun until the air above it trembles. Then, day by day, it shrinks. The edges thicken with minerals. The center darkens. The last wetness withdraws into a stain. This is not a failure of water. It is the basin's rhythm. In humid places, water may flow onward, joining streams and rivers and seas. Here, water often completes its journey by rising into the air. What remains below becomes the visible trace of that journey, a pale rim, a crust, a powder, a thin, hard skin that catches the next morning's light. You can imagine each evaporated pool as a small, quiet clock. It measures heat, wind, humidity, depth, and chemistry. It leaves its result in mineral form. Some clocks run for days, some for seasons, some are erased by the next flood and made again. The Natron Soda Flats Basin holds thousands of these slow clocks, ticking without sound across the open floor. The texture changes with each stage. Wet mud has a dull sheen. Damp salt looks darker and heavier. Dry crust may become chalky and almost weightless. Older crust can break into plates with curled edges. Powdered minerals can drift into soft ripples under the wind. The ground is not one surface, but many, each at a different point in the same quiet cycle. As we walk in imagination, we choose our path gently. We stay where the ground is stable, and we let the softer places remain untouched. The point is not to cross the basin quickly. The point is to feel how much there is to notice. A pale flake, a shallow reflection, a warm breath of air, a line of birds far away, a red pool darkening under the evening sky. The science rests inside these sensations. Evaporation removes water molecules but leaves dissolved ions behind. As concentration rises, minerals reach the point where they can no longer remain dissolved. They crystallize. Different minerals form under different conditions, depending on chemistry, temperature, and how concentrated the brine has become. The basin's beauty is chemistry made slow enough to see. This is why soda flats often feel otherworldly. Their colors and textures do not follow the familiar language of lakes with reeds, waves, and clear shorelines. They speak in mineral skins, alkaline pools, and reflective shallows. They remove the usual softness of water and replace it with something more spare. Yet that spareness is soothing, because there is so little clutter for the mind to hold. You may find that your thoughts begin to spread out like the flats themselves. Edges become less urgent. The day's small concerns lose their sharp outlines. The basin is too wide to hurry through, too pale to grip tightly, too old to be persuaded by worry. It offers a kind of calm that does not comfort by being lush, but by being vast and simple. And as we keep sinking into that simplicity, the living colors of the basin draw us onward again, toward the microbial world that gives some waters their soft red glow. The Natron Soda Flats Basin may look austere, but much of its strangeness comes from life so small that the eye meets it first as color. You see pink or red, and only later remember that color can be alive. In salty, alkaline waters, certain microorganisms find a niche where many others cannot thrive. Cyanobacteria can use sunlight, carbon dioxide, and dissolved nutrients to grow in broad, subtle blooms. Other salt-loving microbes may contribute pigments of their own. Their colors help protect them from strong light, and from a distance, those pigments tint the water like a quiet stain. There is something intimate about this scale. The basin's most visible mystery may come from beings too small to see one by one. You do not watch them move like birds or fish. You watch the water change tone. You notice a pool deepen from brown to rose. You see a shoreline blush in the low light. The life is hidden, but its presence is unmistakable. the alkaline brine becomes both home and filter. It excludes many forms of life, yet allows specialists to flourish. These tiny organisms do not make the basin soft in the usual way. They make it vivid. They turn mineral water into color, and color into food, and food into the possibility of flamingos gathering across the flats in pale, graceful crowds. When we think of ecosystems, we often picture complexity as abundance, tall trees, layered leaves, insects, birdsong, wet soil, and shade. Here, complexity is more restrained. It lives in chemistry, salinity, alkalinity, seasonal water levels, microbial growth, and the timing of birds. The system is delicate, not because it is fragile in appearance, but because its balance depends on exact conditions. You can rest with that idea. A place does not have to look gentle to hold gentleness. The Natron Soda Flats Basin holds its life in careful margins. Too much water, too little water, changes in inflow, shifts in evaporation, and disturbances along nesting areas can all alter the rhythm. The basin seems immense, but its living threads are fine. At the edge of a colored pool, the senses become very small and close. The water may be warm from the day's sun. The air above it may shimmer faintly. A thin crust may float like a broken white petal. The smell is mineral and damp, with the dry dust of the flats behind it. If a bird calls, the sound arrives softened by distance and open space. There is no need to make the microorganisms into characters. Their peace comes from their almost invisible work. They take light into themselves. They grow. They color the water. They feed others. They endure conditions that would be too alkaline for many forms of life. In doing so, they make the basin not empty, but quietly inhabited. As night approaches, the red tones may fade into darkness faster than the whites. Pale crusts remain visible longer, holding the last sky glow. Dark pools become smooth and unreadable. The rift walls lose detail. The air cools another degree. You may feel the basin becoming less like a view and more like a presence, surrounding us in low color and mineral silence. And as the colors settle into dusk, we move toward the birds again, because in the Natron Soda Flats Basin, the flamingos are not separate from the geology, but part of its slow expression. Their presence can feel almost impossible against the starkness of the flats. Yet, they belong here through the smallest food, the shallowest water, and the chemistry that makes this basin strange. Lesser flamingos feed by filtering tiny organisms from alkaline lakes. Their bills are shaped for this delicate work. They lower their heads and sweep through the water, gathering cyanobacteria and other fine particles. It is a quiet way of living, repeated over and over, body moving with water, water carrying food, food made from light. From far away, a flock can seem like a pink mist resting on the basin. Individual birds blur into a soft band of color. Then a few lift their heads, and the band becomes a gathering of long necks and narrow legs. The reflections tremble beneath them. Their movement is unhurried, but never still for long. The whole group shifts like a slow current. You can hear them before you feel close to them. Their voices carry as a low, social murmur, softened by air and distance. It is not a sharp sound in this imagined evening. It becomes part of the basin's texture, like wind over crust or water touching mud. We keep our distance, and in that distance, the birds remain restful, not disturbed, simply present. The nesting life of flamingos here is one of the reasons Lake Natron is so important. The mineral flats and shallow alkaline waters can create conditions that help protect nesting sites, though those conditions are always part of a changing natural system. Mud nests rise from the flats like small cups or cones, formed from the basin itself. The birds build with what the place gives them. This makes the basin feel even stranger and even more beautiful. A landscape that looks hard and pale from afar becomes nursery, feeding ground, shelter, and seasonal gathering place. The same chemical intensity that limits many creatures helps support the food web for these birds. Strangeness is not the opposite of life here. It is the reason this particular life can gather. You may notice how the basin refuses a simple mood. It is stark, but not empty. Bright, but not cheerful. Harsh in chemistry, yet soft in evening light. Vast, yet filled with tiny processes. Strange, yet understandable. When we stand with it long enough, these opposites stop competing, and the place becomes calm in its own exact way. The birds remind us that even the quietest landscapes are connected. A flamingo's color comes partly from pigments in its food. Its food comes from microorganisms. The microorganisms depend on water chemistry and light. The chemistry comes from rock, weathering, and evaporation. The basin becomes a single long sentence, written by geology and read in feathers. And now, as the last warmth leaves the flats and the birds become dim shapes in the distance, we let the basin grow wider around us. We have moved through glare, crust, water, chemistry, microbes and wings. And still the Natron Soda Flats Basin has more quietness to offer. Its deepest feeling is not in any one detail, but in how slowly all the details belong together. The night does not arrive suddenly here. It spreads outward from the bases of the rift walls, gathering first in the hollows, then along the damp margins, then across the open soda flats, where the last brightness lingers. You can feel the air changing against your skin, not becoming cold exactly, but easing away from the dry heat of the day. The mineral ground keeps a little warmth, and the shallow water holds a faint reflection of the sky after the sky itself has darkened. In this hour, the Natron Soda Flats Basin begins to feel less like a place you are looking at, and more like a place you are resting inside. The wide, pale surfaces lose their edges. The colors soften into low bands of gray, silver, rose, and black. You may still hear distant birds, but their calls are quieter now, and each one seems to travel farther because there is so little else for sound to touch. Even the wind feels careful as it moves across the crust. The basin is strange in daylight because it shines too brightly, and strange at dusk because it seems to withdraw into itself. The soda crust no longer dazzles the eye. The red water no longer declares its color. The volcanic slopes, the mudflats, the mineral rims, and the shallow pools all settle into the same slow darkness. It becomes easier to imagine the basin as an ancient bowl, holding not only water and salt, but the unhurried weight of geological time. When we think about time here, we do not need to measure it in a sharp way. The rift has opened through spans so long that human memory becomes almost weightless beside them. The basin has received minerals through rainy seasons, dry seasons, eruptions, weathering, flooding, shrinking, crusting, and dissolving. Every pale plate underfoot is temporary, but the process that makes it is old, patient, and deeply steady. You can let that steadiness move through you. The day's edges may still be present somewhere above us, but they do not belong to this basin. Here, things change by evaporation, by the slow thickening of brine, by the quiet arrival of sediment, by light-feeding organisms too small to see. The Natron Soda Flats Basin does not ask you to keep up with it. It asks you to slow down enough to notice what has always been happening. And as we follow that slow attention farther inward, we come to the margins where the soda flats meet darker earth, scrub, grass, and volcanic stone. This edge is softer than the open basin, though still dry and spare. You may smell dust, warm grass, and minerals together, and the scent has the clean, sun-baked quality of land that has waited a long time for rain. The ground changes beneath you from pale crust to gritty sediment, then to stones worn by heat and weather. The margins matter because the basin is not isolated from the landscape around it. Water begins elsewhere before it becomes strange here. Rain falls on high places, gathers in channels, passes through soils and weathered volcanic rock, and carries dissolved substances downward. By the time it reaches the basin, it has already become a messenger. It brings traces of slopes, springs, ashes, lavas, and old minerals into the low, closed floor. Some of these streams are seasonal, appearing when rain has gathered enough strength to travel. They may run brown with sediment, or clear and shallow over stone, depending on where they have come from. Then they slow, spread, and enter the flats, where open heat and low relief begin their quiet work. You can picture the water arriving with movement, then losing that movement as the basin receives it. There is a gentle lesson in that arrival. Not every journey ends in outward flow. Some journeys end in concentration. The water does not leave the Natron Soda Flats Basin as a river leaving for the sea. It rises into the air, invisible and light, while the heavier part of its story stays behind. In this way, the basin keeps memory as mineral, and every dry surface is a kind of after-image. Along the edge, plants may hold on where conditions allow, rooted in less extreme ground. Their greens and yellows look almost tender after the glare of the flats. They show us how quickly the world can change over a small distance. A few steps may take you from alkaline crust to dusty grass, from wet brine to dry soil, from microbial color to the subdued smell of leaves and stems under warm air. The animals that move through these margins often do so quietly, drawn by water, shade, or open space. We do not need to follow them closely. It is enough to know that the basin's influence reaches outward, shaping where life gathers and where it avoids. The intense center and the gentler edge are part of one system. The strange heart of the basin depends on the ordinary hills around it, just as the edge is shaped by the basin's brightness and chemistry. As night deepens, the boundary between flat and shore becomes more difficult to see. Pale ground catches the faintest light, while dark stones seem to sink into themselves. The air grows calmer. A small sound, a wing beat or a shifting crust, can feel larger than it is. You may feel the space around you widen again, and with that widening comes a softness, because nothing here needs to be answered quickly. Below this quiet margin, our attention returns to the old volcanic presence that gives the Natron Soda Flats Basin so much of its unusual character. The volcanoes do not need to smoke in the distance tonight to be present. They are already in the minerals, in the slopes, in the chemistry of springs, in the dark rocks scattered around the pale floor. Their history has been dissolved, carried, concentrated, and written into the flats. Old Duinyo Lengai stands near this landscape with a calm and singular importance. Its name is often associated with rare carbonatite lavas, which are unlike the more familiar silicate lavas of many volcanoes. Those lavas contain abundant carbonate minerals, and they weather into materials that can influence the chemistry of surrounding waters. You do not have to hold every technical detail. It is enough to feel that this basin sits beside a very unusual source of minerals. When rain touches volcanic rock, it begins a quiet conversation. Water enters cracks, moves through ash, passes over lava, and takes ions into solution. Some of those dissolved materials travel slowly through groundwater. Some move more directly in streams. Eventually, they may enter the basin, where evaporation concentrates them and gives them visible form. The flats become a pale expression of dark volcanic beginnings. There is beauty in that transformation. Something born from heat becomes something that looks cool and chalky under moonlight. Dark rock becomes white crust. Underground chemistry becomes shallow color. A volcano's mineral voice becomes the smooth surface of a soda flat. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is strange partly because it holds opposites so quietly. Fire remembered as salt, rupture remembered as stillness. You can imagine the rift landscape as a long, slow opening in the Earth's surface. It does not feel dramatic at this hour. The stars above may seem more immediate than the faults below, yet the basin's broad, low shape comes from that deep movement. The land has stretched, dropped, lifted, and broken over time, and where it formed a low place, water and minerals found somewhere to gather. In many landscapes, rivers keep basins fresh by carrying dissolved minerals onward. Here, the closed drainage changes everything. The basin behaves more like a shallow receiving bowl than a passing channel. What comes in tends to remain until water vanishes upward. The difference is subtle in wording and enormous in result. A through-flowing lake and a closed alkaline lake can begin with similar rain, but end in very different worlds. This is why the Natron Soda Flats Basin can feel so distilled. It is not only that water evaporates, it is that the whole landscape encourages gathering. The rift gives the low place. The volcanoes give minerals. The climate gives heat and dryness. The lack of an easy outlet gives concentration. Each condition leans gently into the next until strangeness becomes inevitable. As we rest with that thought, the ground beneath us seems to hold more meaning. A crusted patch is no longer just a crusted patch. It is an event in progress, the surface result of a system reaching a temporary pause. The mud below it may still be damp, the salts may still be rearranging themselves. A future rain may dissolve it, spread it, and let it form again somewhere else. The basin's textures can seem delicate enough to belong to a dream. Thin mineral films may shine like dull glass. Powdery surfaces may take footprints lightly. Raised ridges may mark where brine once pooled and thickened. In low places, the crust can break into plates that overlap or curl. None of these shapes is permanent, and that impermanence makes them feel even quieter. And as the volcanic darkness gathers around the pale floor, we move deeper into the question of why the water itself becomes so unlike ordinary water. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is a lesson in what happens when a lake is shallow, mineral-rich and exposed to strong evaporation. The water does not remain a neutral mirror for long. It becomes concentrated, alkaline, sometimes colored, sometimes crusted at the edge with its own dissolved past. The high alkalinity comes largely from sodium carbonate and related compounds, which raise the pH of the water. In simple terms, the basin's water carries a strong mineral character because of what dissolves into it and what stays behind when water evaporates. You can think of it as tea left in the sun, not in flavor, but in principle. The liquid reduces, and everything dissolved inside it becomes stronger. This concentration affects the way the lake behaves. A shallow edge may feel slick with fine mineral mud. The water may leave pale lines on stones or crusts along the shore. Evaporation can create patterned surfaces that seem etched into the basin. The colors change with depth, microorganisms, minerals, and light angle. From 1 hour to the next, the same pool may seem to belong to a different landscape. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is strange because it exposes processes that are often hidden or diluted elsewhere. In many lakes, dissolved minerals remain invisible, spread through deeper water or carried away by outflow. Here, the minerals announce themselves through crusts, powders, rims, sheens, and hard pale surfaces. Chemistry becomes visible enough to walk beside, and sometimes visible enough to glow in the evening light. You may notice that the basin's beauty asks for a slower kind of looking. There is no single grand object to fix your attention forever. Instead, there are variations across a wide field, a little brighter here, a little darker there, a red pool beside a white crust, a damp line, a dry plate, a rough ridge, a smooth mirror. The mind softens when it follows these gentle differences. The heat of the day helps make the lake's chemistry more intense. Warm air increases evaporation, especially when the atmosphere is dry and the wind moves across open water. Shallow water responds quickly. It warms, concentrates, and shrinks. You can imagine the surface lowering by amounts too small to notice moment by moment, while the mineral content grows a little stronger in what remains. At the same time, seasonal rains can loosen the basin's intensity. In wetter periods, inflowing water may spread the lake, dilute some parts, dissolve crusts, and shift the location of mineral formation. Then dry conditions return, and concentration resumes. The basin moves between expansion and contraction, wetness and crust, dilution and strength, but it does so in a rhythm that feels ancient rather than restless. There is a sleep-like comfort in that rhythm. You breathe in, and the body gathers. You breathe out, and the body releases. The basin receives water, and later releases it upward. It gathers minerals, then rearranges them. It holds life, then shifts the conditions that life must follow. Nothing here is fixed, yet nothing feels hurried. The whole landscape seems to breathe through seasons. As we stay with the water, we begin to sense how shallow depth can hold great complexity. A few inches of brine may contain gradients of temperature, salt, light, and microbial life. The surface may reflect the sky, while just below it organisms use sunlight in dense, colorful communities. Along the bottom, fine sediment and minerals may form soft layers, slick mats, and delicate chemical boundaries. You do not need deep water to feel depth. In the Natron Soda Flats Basin, Depth is folded into concentration. It is in the long journey of dissolved minerals. It is in the age of the rift. It is in the microbial worlds hidden inside colored water. It is in the repeating seasons that write and erase the same flats. The lake may be shallow, but its meaning goes downward. And as we let that shallow depth hold us, the basin's surface begins to resemble a quiet sky turned upside down. The stars appear above, and the remaining water catches them in broken pieces. Between the reflections, pale crusts gleam faintly. The air has cooled enough that your breathing feels easier. Far away, a flamingo shifts, or a small group murmurs, and then the silence settles back over everything. The Natron Soda Flats Basin at night is strange in another way, because its daytime intensity becomes a low, almost tender darkness. What felt glaring becomes gentle. What seemed dry becomes restful. What appeared chemically severe becomes an immense stillness under stars. The basin does not change its nature, but your way of receiving it changes, and that is part of the place too. You may feel how the landscape asks nothing performative from us. We do not need to cross it, measure it, photograph it, or solve it. We can simply remain with the cooling air and the mineral smell, while the flats continue their slow work. There is relief in allowing a place to be more ancient than our questions. The basin has been strange for longer than we have been awake to it. Below the night surface, the microbial life continues in ways that depend on light, chemistry, and time. Some processes slow with darkness. Others continue quietly. The colored mats and blooms that marked the water in daylight are still there, held in brine, sediment, and thin films. We cannot see them clearly now, but we know their work is part of the basin's pulse. This hiddenness matters. Many of the most important things in the Natron Soda Flats Basin are not immediately visible. Dissolved ions cannot be seen until they form crust. Microbes may appear only as color. Groundwater paths are hidden under stone. Faults may be read through landscape shape rather than felt directly. The basin teaches attention to traces, and traces are gentle things to follow when the mind is tired. A trace does not demand, it invites. A pale ring invites you to imagine a higher shoreline. A red pool invites you to imagine microscopic life. A warm spring invites you to imagine water moving underground. A white flat invites you to imagine evaporation repeated again and again. The place becomes a series of quiet suggestions, each one leading deeper into calm. And as we move through these suggestions, we come to the way the basin holds color during different times of day. Morning might make the flats look cold and silver, even before the heat rises. Midday can make them almost white, with a brightness that seems to hum at the edge of vision. Evening returns warmth to the scene, turning crusts cream-colored and pools copper, rose, or muted red. The strange colors are not decoration, they are evidence. White can speak of evaporite minerals. Red and pink can speak of salt-loving microorganisms. Dark green or brown can speak of wet sediments, microbial mats or deeper brine. Black and gray slopes speak of volcanic rock and shadow. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is like a language made of color, but spoken slowly enough that we can rest between words. If you imagine looking down from above, the basin may appear as an irregular painting of pale flats, dark margins, reddish shallows, and reflective water. But from where we stand, close to the ground, the colors are more intimate. They gather at ankle height, in rims and stains and wet patches. The world becomes horizontal, and your attention lowers with it. That lowering is part of the sleep of the place. Your gaze no longer reaches for far peaks or fast movement. It settles near the ground, where salt crystals catch faint light and shallow water holds a trembling reflection. The body understands low attention. It is the attention of resting, of lying down, of letting thought come closer to breath. There may be small ridges where wind has moved mineral dust across the flats. There may be tiny depressions where brine once lingered. There may be sharp little crystals at the edges of drying pans. Though we pass them softly in imagination, every surface carries a record of water's last position. The whole basin is a map of departures, but the feeling is not loss. It is release. Water leaves and something remains. That is the simple pattern. It leaves into the sky, into warm air, into night humidity, into the invisible movement above the flats. What remains is salt, soda, mud, color, and a surface ready to change again. In this way, the Natron Soda Flats Basin becomes a place where absence is visible, where vanished water leaves a pale shape behind. You can let that idea become restful. Not everything that leaves is gone without a trace. Some things leave a gentler outline, a shoreline on stone, a mineral rim, a softened memory in the body. The basin holds these outlines without drama, and we can rest beside them without needing to hold them tightly. And as the night opens wider, we move toward the seasonality of the basin, because its strangeness is never exactly the same from one time to another. The Natron Soda Flats Basin changes with rain and drought, with inflow and evaporation, with breeding seasons, microbial blooms, and shifting shorelines. It is not a static white floor. It is a slow cycle, seen differently depending on when you arrive. During wetter periods, the lake may spread and soften the flats, covering crusts that had hardened in the dry season. Water can dissolve mineral surfaces and carry them into new positions. Mud becomes slick, edges blur, reflections widen. The basin may feel more like a shallow inland sea, though still mineral-rich and unusual, with the sky lying across it in long, trembling bands. During drier times, the water draws back, flats emerge, crusts form, colors become concentrated in remaining pools. The lake's edge can retreat into a lace of wet patches, dry pans and mineral shelves. The ground becomes brighter and more patterned. What was hidden underwater becomes exposed, and the basin shows its inner geometry. Neither season is the true basin alone. The basin is the movement between them. It is water arriving and withdrawing. It is life responding. It is birds gathering when conditions are right, and dispersing when the rhythm shifts. It is microbes blooming, salts crystallizing, sediments settling, and warm air lifting moisture away. The strangeness lives in the cycle, not just in any single view. When you think of a place changing, you may imagine speed, noise, and visible motion. Here, change is often a slow alteration of texture. A surface that was reflective becomes matte. A pool that was red becomes brown. A crust that was smooth becomes cracked. A shoreline that was sharp becomes dissolved. You might miss it if you watched for only a moment, but the basin is never finished. This unfinished quality is calming because it belongs to natural time. The basin does not need completion. It does not need to arrive at a final form. It rests in repeating states, each one temporary and sufficient. There is a deep comfort in that, especially when you are tired. You do not need to become finished tonight either. You can simply be within your own quiet cycle. The seasonal rains also remind us that the basin is connected to skies far beyond its flat center. Clouds gather over highlands. Storms release water. Streams swell and carry sediment. The low basin receives what the weather has given elsewhere. Later, under clear heat, the received water thins and disappears upward. Sky becomes water. Water becomes brine. Brine becomes crust. And crust waits for sky again. This cycle has no sharp beginning. We enter it wherever we are. Tonight, we enter at dusk, with the flats cooling and the water still holding faint reflections. Tomorrow, heat will rise again from the pale surface. A future rain will rewrite edges we have imagined. A future dry wind will make new crusts. The Natron Soda Flats Basin continues, with or without our attention, and that independence is peaceful. And as we rest inside this seasonal breathing, the basin's quiet ecosystem becomes clearer, not as abundance everywhere, but as connection across very particular conditions. The microorganisms feed the flamingos. The water chemistry shapes the microorganisms. The hydrology shapes the chemistry. The rift and volcanoes shape the hydrology. Everything depends on everything else, but the dependencies are spread out, calm and precise. The lesser flamingos may be the most visible expression of this web, yet they are only one part of it. There are also algae. cyanobacteria, brine-tolerant organisms, insects, and small invertebrate life in suitable areas, and animals along the less alkaline margins. The open basin may look minimal, but its life is arranged around gradients. Slight differences in salinity, water depth, and chemistry can change what is possible. Gradients are gentle boundaries. They are not walls. A pool becomes shallower, a shoreline becomes drier, a mudflat becomes crusted, a freshwater inflow becomes alkaline as it mixes. Life follows these changing edges. It gathers where the conditions are right, thins where they are not, and returns when the basin shifts again. You can feel how patient a living system can be when it has learned to follow change. At the shoreline, a fresher inflow may create a small zone where different organisms can live. A little farther in, the water grows more alkaline and selective. Farther still, brine and crust dominate. These transitions may happen across short distances, yet they are part of the basin's whole design. The strange center and the gentler edge speak to each other through water, sediment, and season. You may picture yourself sitting near one of these transitions, where the ground is firm and the view opens across the flats. Behind you, sparse vegetation darkens in the evening. Ahead, pale crust and water stretch away. The air smells of dust, salt, and warm earth. The silence has layers, near and far, dry and damp, living and mineral. It is a good place to let the mind become quiet. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is strange because it refuses the usual separations between geology and ecology. The living world is not merely placed on top of the land. It is shaped by dissolved rock, evaporation, alkalinity, and closed drainage. The geological process becomes food web. The mineral basin becomes bird habitat. The Rift Valley becomes a nursery for color, movement, and soft, distant sound. There is a humility in seeing life this way. The flamingo is beautiful, but the beauty does not begin with the bird. It begins with rocks weathering under rain, with water moving downhill, with a shallow basin holding what arrives, with sunlight feeding microbes, with a bill filtering food from brine. Beauty becomes distributed through the whole system. Nothing has to stand alone. As night deepens further, the birds grow harder to distinguish. They become low, pale shapes, then dim movement, then part of the dark. The flats remain faintly visible, where crust catches starlight. The water has almost no color now, only a surface that gathers small lights from above. You may feel your body growing heavier in the calm, as if the basin's wide flatness has entered your breathing. And as your attention lowers, we can move into the fine details of salt and crystal, because the smallest formations carry the basin's slowest music. A crystal begins when dissolved material finds the right conditions to arrange itself into structure. It may form along an edge, in a film, around a grain of sediment, or within a drying patch of brine. From far away, it is whiteness. Up close, it is order. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is full of such quiet order. Crystals grow when concentration, temperature, and chemistry allow them to. They may be too small to see clearly, or large enough to give the ground texture. They may form crusts that crack as they dry, or powdery surfaces that lift under a light wind. They may dissolve again when water returns, surrendering their form without resistance. This dissolving and reforming gives the basin a delicate impermanence. The crystals are not monuments. They are moments. They appear from solution, hold their shape for a time, and then return to solution when conditions change. The process can repeat countless times, not in exactly the same place or pattern, but with the same quiet logic. The basin's surface is always a temporary arrangement of ancient materials. If you imagine touching a dry crust with the gentlest pressure, you might feel it give slightly brittle and hollow over softer sediment. A small piece might sound faintly crisp. Powder might cling to the fingertips in imagination, pale and dry. Near water, the texture changes to slickness, coolness, and the smooth resistance of wet mud. The senses move from powder to crust to brine, each one a different state of the same slow cycle. The white mineral flats can look like snow from a distance, especially under soft light, but they belong to heat, not cold. This is part of their strangeness. The eye sees brightness and thinks of frost, while the body feels warm air and dry dust. The mind has to adjust, and that adjustment creates a dreamy feeling, as if the landscape is speaking in familiar colors with unfamiliar meaning. In that dreaminess, the basin becomes almost lunar, though we stay firmly on Earth. The comparison comes easily because the open flats feel spare and reflective, with few vertical shapes to interrupt them. Yet the processes here are deeply earthly. Rain, rock, microbes, birds, evaporation, and warm wind all belong to this planet's patient creativity. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is alien only because Earth itself can be alien. You can let that thought soften the idea of strangeness. Strange does not mean separate from us. It means there is more variety in the natural world than our usual habits prepare us to see. A soda flat, a volcanic lake, a microbial bloom, a flamingo nursery, a crust of sodium carbonate under a darkening sky, all of these are Earth, being Earth in a less familiar voice. The crystals underfoot are part of that voice. They speak without sound, through texture and light. A flat white pan returns moonlight differently from wet mud. A crusted rim outlines old water. A powdery patch softens the surface like ash. These subtle differences let the basin communicate its recent history, and we receive it slowly, with the kind of attention that belongs near sleep. And as we listen to that mineral quiet, the surrounding darkness becomes deeper, and the stars begin to feel like part of the basin's surface. Reflected points tremble in shallow water, while the real points remain steady above. Between them lies warm air, cooling ground, and a wide silence that seems almost touchable. The Natron Soda Flats Basin rests between earth and sky, holding both in its thin remaining water. At night, the lack of strong color allows other sensations to come forward. You feel the dry air inside each breath. You sense the ground's faint warmth through the imagined soles of your feet. You smell minerals, dust, and distant dampness. You hear the softest movements more clearly because there are no waves, no traffic, no voices pressing close. The place becomes not empty, but spacious enough for small sensations. There may be insects near the gentler margins, and their sounds, if present, are thin and intermittent. A bird may stir. A breeze may cross the flats and fade before reaching the rocks. The shallow water may make a nearly silent movement against a mineral edge. These sounds do not break the stillness. They reveal it, the way a single small ripple reveals the smoothness of a pool. The basin's strange chemistry continues under this quiet. Nothing about darkness removes the dissolved minerals. The water remains alkaline. The salts remain ready to crystallize or dissolve with the next change. The mud holds its fine particles. The microbial mats rest in their places. The landscape is calm, but not paused. It is simply working at a pace that does not disturb the night. We can think of the basin now as a sleeping system. Though not sleeping in the human sense, it rests without stopping. Its processes slow, shift, and continue. Heat stored in ground radiates upward. Moisture moves. Chemical boundaries settle. Birds balance on long legs or tuck into themselves. The basin holds all of it with immense patience, and you can borrow a little of that patience for your own body. As we move inward again, not by walking quickly, but by imagining our attention drifting across the flats, we reach the places where mud and mineral meet most softly. Here the ground may be darker, damp beneath a thin crust, and marked by shallow textures. Mud in soda flats is not just ordinary mud. It is sediment mixed with salts, carbonates, organic films, and the memory of repeated wetting and drying. The smell here might be richer, more earthy beneath the alkaline sharpness. A damp patch can hold warmth longer than dry crust. Its surface may be smooth enough to reflect a trace of light, or wrinkled where it has begun to dry. If you look closely in imagination, you may see tiny cracks forming, each one beginning as a thin line that widens as the surface loses moisture. Cracking mud is another kind of writing. It records contraction. As water leaves, the mud shrinks, and the surface pulls apart into polygons and irregular plates. Later, minerals can outline those cracks. More water can fill them. More drying can reopen them. The Natron Soda Flats Basin becomes a layered record of expansion and contraction, held in patterns that seem still until you understand their making. These patterns are restful because they are self-organizing. No one has to plan them. The mud dries, tension builds, cracks form, and shapes appear. Similar patterns can be found in deserts, playas, tidal flats, and other evaporating landscapes, but here they are colored by the basin's alkaline chemistry and volcanic setting. Familiar processes arrive in an unfamiliar place, and the result feels quietly uncanny. You may notice how much of the basin's strangeness comes from repetition with variation. Evaporation repeats, but each crust differs. Rain repeats, but each flood spreads differently. Microbial growth repeats, but colors shift with conditions. Birds return, but not in exactly the same numbers or positions. The land does not copy itself. It remembers a pattern and then makes it new. That kind of repetition is close to breathing, and close to sleep. The same motion returns, but each breath is slightly different. The same stillness deepens, but each minute has its own texture. You are here beside the Natron Soda Flats Basin, and also inside your own quiet rhythm, where thoughts dissolve and reform more gently, like minerals at the edge of a shallow pool. And as our attention settles further, the basin's scale becomes important again. It is wide enough that distance softens everything. The far shore may be lost in haze by day, and in darkness by night. Objects at the edge of vision become uncertain, then dissolve into light or shadow. This openness is part of why the place feels strange. It removes familiar enclosure and leaves you with horizon. A horizon across Soda Flats is not like a forest edge or a mountain ridge. It may be pale, wavering, reflective, and difficult to place. Heat shimmer can lift distant shapes. Shallow water can mirror sky and erase the ground. The eye searches for certainty and finds softness instead. That softness can be deeply soothing once you stop asking the landscape to become clear. The Natron Soda Flats Basin teaches the mind to accept blurred boundaries. Water becomes air in reflection. Wet ground becomes dry ground by degrees. Living color becomes mineral color at a distance. The edge of the lake shifts with season. Even the meaning of barrenness changes when you understand the microbial life and the flamingos. Nothing here is as simple as the first glance suggests. Yet the complexity never becomes loud. It stays spread across space. You can hold one piece at a time. The pale crust, the red pool, the warm spring, the distant bird, the volcanic slope, the dry wind. Each part is small enough to rest with, and together they create a feeling of vast, quiet intelligence without any need for words. This is why the basin is a good place for a sleepy mind. It offers detail without urgency. It offers mystery without threat. It offers science that moves in slow loops, not sharp turns. You can understand a little, then let go. You can picture a process, then let it blur. The landscape remains steady, whether you follow every detail or drift between them. As we move into the later night, the sky becomes clearer overhead. The stars do not brighten all at once. They accumulate slowly, the way salts accumulate in the basin's water. One appears, then another, then many more, until the darkness is full of fine points. In shallow pools, those points appear again, broken by tiny movements and softened by the mineral surface. The basin now holds two kinds of pale. There is the pale of salt below, and the pale of stars above. Between them, the dark water lies in thin sheets. You can feel how still the air has become, and how the open space gives every breath room to lengthen. The Natron Soda Flats Basin, so bright under noon, now becomes a low reflective darkness, and its strangeness becomes quieter. We might imagine the ancient sediments below us, layer after layer beneath the present crust. Some layers formed in wetter times. Some may hold evidence of past lake levels, past inflows, past mineral conditions, and changing climate. The basin floor is not just a surface, but an archive, with pages made of mud, salts, carbonates, and fine particles carried from the surrounding land. Geologists read such archives carefully. They look for mineral layers, sediment textures, chemical signatures, and shapes that speak of earlier environments. We do not need to read them with instruments tonight. We can simply sense that beneath the current flats are older flats, older waters, older shorelines, and older quiets. The present basin rests on many earlier versions of itself. This thought gives the ground a deep calm. Every surface we see is temporary, but it is not isolated. It belongs to a sequence. Before this crust, another crust. Before this shoreline, another shoreline. Before this microbial bloom, other blooms under other skies. The Natron Soda Flats Basin has been repeating and altering itself through time. Each version leaving something behind. Each version making room for the next. There is tenderness in being temporary within something ancient. You do not have to last like a rift valley to belong to it. A breath belongs. A footprint would belong, though we leave none here. A passing thought belongs, then fades. The basin has room for brief presences because it is so old, and because it has never depended on holding any single moment forever. And as we follow the idea of older waters, we can imagine times when the basin may have looked different, with lake levels higher or lower depending on climate and inflow. Closed basins often remember wet and dry periods in their sediments. A wetter climate can expand water across the floor. A drier climate can expose flats and intensify salinity. The present strangeness is one chapter in a much longer rhythm. This longer rhythm is not separate from the life here. Flamingos, microbes, and shoreline communities all respond to water levels and chemistry. When conditions shift, feeding areas shift. Nesting sites may appear or become unsuitable. Microbial blooms may spread or fade. The basin's living patterns are tied to the same hydrological pulse that shapes the mineral surface. You can feel how everything is connected without needing it to become complicated in your mind. Water level rises, and the flats soften. Water level falls, and crusts form. Chemistry dilutes, then concentrates. Life follows, rests, returns, disperses, gathers. The whole system has the slow responsiveness of a sleeping body turning gently in the night. The night air now has a cooler edge, and the warmth from the ground is almost gone. The smell of dust has softened. The mineral scent remains, faint but distinct. Far across the flats, the shallow water holds a darker shine, and the white crusts appear like low clouds settled on earth. You may feel your thoughts becoming spacious, as if they too have flattened and quieted under the stars. Below this star-filled stillness, the hidden groundwater paths continue to matter. Some water enters the basin from the surface, through streams and rain. Some may arrive through springs after traveling underground through fractures and porous rocks. Along the way, it can warm, dissolve minerals, and emerge carrying the chemistry of places we cannot see. Springs are one way the invisible becomes visible. At a spring, water is not simply arriving from above. It is rising from a longer route. It may have spent time underground, in darkness, in contact with rock, moving slowly through pressure and warmth. When it reaches the basin, it brings that hidden journey into the open air. The surface may ripple gently, the mud may be softer, the temperature may feel different, and the chemistry may add another layer to the lake. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is strange, partly because so many unseen paths meet in one visible place. Rainfall, groundwater, volcanic minerals, microbial life, evaporation, and bird migration all converge on the flats. You can stand on the surface and see only pale ground and shallow water, but beneath and beyond that view are routes of movement too slow or too broad to follow with the eye. This hidden convergence gives the basin its depth of feeling. It is not a simple empty pan, it is a meeting place. The sky sends water, the rocks send minerals, the earth sends heat. The microbes receive light, the birds arrive when food and nesting conditions allow. The wind reshapes powder and dust, the sun removes water. Each presence changes the others, and then the basin rests again. You can let that meeting place feeling settle around you. There is no crowding in it. Everything arrives with space between. A spring here, a flock there, a crust forming over days, a fault line shaping the land over ages, a color spreading through a pool under sunlight. The basin's connections are calm because they do not happen all at once in a way that overwhelms the senses. As the moon, if it is present, lifts higher, the flats may take on a muted glow. Moonlight on soda crust is softer than sunlight, less glaring, more forgiving. It turns the ground into a pale fabric spread across the basin floor. Shallow pools become dark mirrors. Volcanic rocks look black and still. The rift walls seem farther away, and the open center feels almost weightless. In that moonlit quiet, the Natron Soda Flats Basin seems to hover between dryness and water. It is not a desert in the simple sense, because water is essential to its making. It is not a lake in the familiar sense, because water here is often shallow, concentrated, and withdrawing. It is a basin of transitions, a place where categories loosen, and the mind no longer has to keep them firm. This loosening can be restful. You do not need the landscape to be one thing. It can be lake and flat, wet and dry, living and mineral, bright and dark, volcanic and delicate. You can also be more than one thing as you fall asleep, awake and drifting, listening and resting, here and already partly elsewhere. The basin allows overlap, and overlap is where drowsiness begins. And as the night carries us onward, the quiet becomes deeper around the idea of strangeness itself. Why is this place so strange? Because the ordinary ingredients of Earth have been gathered into an uncommon arrangement. Water, sun, rock, heat, microbes, birds, and time are not unusual alone. But here, in this closed rift basin, they make a landscape that feels almost impossible in its calm. The word strange can carry tension, but it does not have to. Here, strange means finely made by conditions. Strange means a white crust where water has vanished. Strange means red life in alkaline brine. Strange means flamingos feeding in a lake that looks too mineral for softness. Strange means dark volcanic slopes holding a pale basin under a huge sky. Strange means the earth is wider in its imagination than we are. You can rest in that wider imagination. The Natron Soda Flats Basin does not need to be familiar to be peaceful. Its peace comes from patience, from the absence of hurry, from the way each process unfolds according to quiet laws. Evaporation does not argue with water. Crystals do not rush to form. Birds do not explain their arrival. The rift does not announce its movement. Everything simply continues. There is a certain kindness in landscapes that do not ask to be interpreted too quickly. They let you return again and again, each time seeing another layer. First glare, then color, then chemistry, then life, then geology, then time, then the softness beneath the strangeness. We have been moving through these layers slowly, and each one has made the basin quieter rather than louder. The flats now seem almost motionless, though we know they are not. Moisture is still shifting. Heat is still leaving the ground. Salts are still present in their delicate arrangements. Somewhere a bird may settle its feathers. Somewhere under a thin crust, damp mud may hold the day's last warmth. The basin is full of small continuities that do not disturb its stillness. As we remain here, you may begin to feel the bed beneath you more clearly if you are listening from a room far away from these flats. The basin's flatness and your own resting place can become one gentle surface in the mind. The pale mineral ground, the cool sheet, the darkening sky, the quiet room, all of them can fold together softly without needing to be separated. And as that folding begins, we keep moving, not toward an ending, but farther into the basin's low, ancient calm. The next layer is the silence that comes after explanation, when the facts remain, but they no longer need to be held tightly. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is still a closed alkaline basin in a volcanic rift landscape. It is still shaped by evaporation, sodium carbonate, shallow water, microbial color, and seasonal life. But now those facts feel like stones warmed by the day and cooling in your hand. You can hold them lightly. You can set them down. The lake will remain alkaline. The flats will remain pale. The microorganisms will keep their hidden work when light returns. The flamingos will follow conditions older than our thoughts. The rift will keep opening at its nearly unimaginable pace. There is no need to carry the whole basin at once. You can carry one image, a white crust under moonlight, a red pool at evening, a warm spring entering shallow brine, a line of flamingos dissolving into dusk, a black volcanic slope beyond the flats. Any one of these is enough to keep you near the place while the rest of the landscape becomes soft and indistinct. The air seems stiller now, and the sounds are fewer. If wind crosses the basin, it does so lightly, moving over mineral surfaces with a dry hush. The stars above appear steady, while their reflections tremble in the thinnest water. Your breathing can follow that faint trembling, rising and settling, until even the idea of movement becomes slow. And as we drift along the moonlit edge of the flats, the basin's pale surfaces seem almost to float. The crusts are attached to the earth, but the low light makes them appear weightless. Their cracks and ridges are softened. Their roughness is hidden. The mineral ground becomes a quiet brightness spread over darker sediment, and you can imagine it continuing far beyond the reach of sight. This is another way the Natron Soda Flats Basin feels strange. It can make solid ground look like a reflection, and shallow water look like open sky. It reverses expectations so gently that you may not notice at first. The pale surface appears cold, though it is born of heat. The red water appears dramatic, though it is the work of small organisms. The empty flat appears lifeless, though it supports a precise and delicate web. The longer we stay, the more peaceful those reversals become. They loosen the mind's grip on simple categories. They show that Earth can hold many truths in the same place. A basin can be austere and full of life. A lake can be shallow and profound. A mineral flat can be temporary and ancient. A strange landscape can be a place of rest. You may feel your attention moving more slowly now, as if it has learned from evaporation itself. A thought rises, lightens and disappears. What remains is quieter. Another thought comes, and it too becomes thin, leaving only a faint trace. The basin does this with water, and sleep does it with the day. Both are forms of release. Across the flats, old shorelines may lie faintly visible as ridges, benches, or changes in texture. They mark where water once stood at a different level. They are not dramatic cliffs, but subtle records of former surfaces. In low light, they may appear as slight shadows or pale bands. The basin keeps these memories without announcing them, and that restraint makes them feel more intimate. A shoreline is a meeting place between water and land, but in a changing basin it is also a moving memory. Today's edge is not tomorrow's edge. This season's lake is not every season's lake. The Natron Soda Flats Basin holds many possible shorelines within its shape, and each one has touched the ground for a time before retreating into history. There is calm in imagining those former waters. Some were broader, some narrower, some perhaps clearer, some more concentrated. Each one reflected a different sky. Each one left something behind. We do not need to know every detail tonight. We can simply sense the basin as layered with old levels, old reflections, old evaporations, and old returns. The present night rests above all of them. Stars shine over current water, current crust, current birds, current silence. But beneath this moment are older versions, and beneath those, older still. The basin becomes deeper the longer you think about it, not downward in visible depth, but backward in time. You can let that backward depth hold you the way deep water holds a sinking light, and as we sink into that older feeling, the mineral flats become almost like pages of a book that writes itself slowly and then allows parts of itself to be erased. Rain erases by dissolving, wind erases by moving dust, new brine writes by depositing crystals, mud writes by cracking, microbes write by coloring water, birds write briefly with tracks and nests, then season and weather soften those marks away. Nothing here needs to be permanent to matter. That may be one of the basin's gentlest teachings. A crust that lasts a season still belongs. A bloom that colors water for a time still changes the life around it. A shallow pool that vanishes still leaves minerals. A flock that gathers and moves on still expresses the chemistry beneath it. Temporary things can be fully real. You can rest with that because sleep itself is temporary and real. It comes for a time, changes the body, changes the mind, and then lets morning arrive. Tonight, the Natron Soda Flats Basin offers its own version of that temporary rest. It holds a night's surface over a deep history. It lets processes continue quietly while the visible world grows dim. The moonlit flats now seem almost silent enough to hear your own pulse. The air touches the skin lightly. The mineral smell is faint, almost folded into the darkness. The basin is wide around us, but not lonely. It is filled with slow company: rocks, salts, water, microbes, birds, wind, old shorelines, underground paths, and the immense patience of the rift. As we keep moving through this patience, we can imagine the first pale hint of morning far ahead, though we do not need to reach it yet. Before dawn, the basin may be at its coolest and quietest. The crusts hold a dull whiteness. The water is dark. Birds are shapes more than colors. The rift walls stand like deeper shadows at the edge of everything. The landscape feels suspended, as if waiting without impatience. That waiting is not empty. It contains all the day's future transformations. Light will return and reveal color. Heat will rise and quicken evaporation. Reflections will sharpen. Microbial pigments will show again. Flamingos will feed in shallows where the water supports them. The flats will brighten until the eye has to soften. But for now, all of that remains folded inside darkness. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is strange even in this waiting, because so much of it depends on what cannot be seen at once. You cannot see the full catchment from the flat center. You cannot see dissolved chemistry until it colors or crusts the surface. You cannot see the rift moving. You cannot see every microbe in a bloom. Yet the place is made of these hidden continuities. Hidden continuities are soothing because they do not require constant attention. The heart beats without being watched. Breath moves when we forget to guide it. The earth cools after sunset. The basin concentrates minerals over time. There are processes that carry us without asking us to manage them. In this landscape, that truth becomes visible enough to trust. And as we trust it, the dry crust under the imagined night seems less brittle, less severe, more like a delicate cover over a patient interior. Beneath it, sediment holds moisture in places. Salts wait to dissolve or grow. Organic films rest where conditions allow. The surface may look still, but stillness here is a way of holding many slow possibilities at once. You can feel the same in your own body as you listen. The surface of thought may become quiet, while deeper processes continue gently. Muscles release. Breath lengthens. The day dissolves. Sleep begins to crystallize, not sharply, but softly, around the edges of awareness. The basin offers a landscape for that change, wide enough to hold whatever drifts through. Now the flats open again in imagination, pale and low beneath the night. We move without footsteps, as if carried by attention alone. The lake edge lies somewhere ahead, then beside us, then behind us, because in this place, edges shift, and the mind is allowed to drift. The Natron Soda Flats Basin remains the center of everything, but the center is broad, quiet, and without walls. There is a shallow pool nearby, dark on its surface, with a rim of pale mineral around it. The rim may have formed as water evaporated and left dissolved material behind. In daylight, it might look bright white or cream-colored. Now it is soft gray, with a faint shine where moisture remains. The pool reflects a few stars, and each reflected star trembles when the air moves. At the edge of that pool, a thin skin may have begun to form. It is fragile and nearly still. The water below it holds salts, microorganisms, and fine suspended matter. The mud beneath holds more layers, more traces. A place that seems small enough to step across contains a whole arrangement of chemistry, life, and time. We pause beside it without touching it, and the pause feels complete. This is how the basin asks to be known. Not all at once, but by small, patient attention. One pool, one crust, one bird sound, one volcanic silhouette, one shoreline trace. Each detail opens into the larger system, and then closes again into quiet. The mind can follow, or it can let the detail pass. Either way, the basin remains calm, and as the pool darkens further, we let our attention lift just enough to see the vastness around it. The same process happening here has happened across many parts of the flats, each one slightly different. Some pools are more concentrated, some crusts are newer, some sediments are darker, some surfaces have already dried completely. The basin is a field of variations on the same slow theme. A theme can be restful when it returns without force. Evaporation, crust, color, water, bird, stone, silence. These are the basin's returning notes, but they do not arrive as a sharp list. They blend into one another, the way evening blends into night. You can feel them repeating under the surface of the narration, making the place easier to remain inside. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is not strange because it breaks natural rules. It is strange because it follows them with unusual clarity. In this closed, hot, mineral-rich basin, the consequences of those rules become visible. Water leaves, salts remain, life specializes, birds gather, surfaces change. The rift holds the shape, the volcanoes enrich the chemistry, the sky returns again and again. There is no need to add drama to such a place. Its natural logic is enough. The more calmly we look, the more remarkable it becomes. A shallow alkaline lake at the edge of volcanic highlands becomes a world of pale crusts, red waters, rare nesting grounds, and quiet mineral transformation. The strangeness is not loud, it is exact. The night has settled fully now, and the basin's details are held in low contrast. You may feel your own thoughts becoming low contrast too, less separated, less urgent, more like broad shapes under moonlight. The warm mineral glare of the day has become a cool memory. The air has softened. The open flats seem to breathe with the darkness, and we remain within that breath. And as we remain, the question of why this basin is so strange continues to answer itself through sensation. It is strange because the ground can look like frost in a hot land. It is strange because water can be shallow, yet chemically powerful. It is strange because microscopic life can color whole surfaces. It is strange because birds gather in a place shaped by salts and volcanic stone. It is strange because everything here is spare, and yet nothing is simple. You can let those answers pass through you slowly. They do not need to be memorized. The basin is not an exam. It is a place, a warm, pale, mineral, living, ancient place, held in the open arms of a rift valley. We are only staying with it long enough for its unfamiliar calm to become familiar, and for its wide silence to make room inside the mind. The dry wind moves again, just lightly. It touches the crust and slips onward. It carries no urgency, only the faint smell of soda flats and dust. In the distance, a soft murmur rises and fades from the birds. The stars remain, the water remains, the pale ground remains. The Natron Soda Flats Basin continues to be strange in the dark, and peaceful because of it. The darkness here does not feel like an absence, once you have stayed with it for a while. It feels like a soft covering placed over the glare of the flats, allowing the basin to rest from its own brightness. You can sense the white crusts without needing to see every edge, and you can imagine the shallow brine holding its quiet chemistry beneath the night. The Natron Soda Flats Basin becomes less visual now, and more bodily, a place felt through warmth, dryness, space and stillness. Your breathing can follow the way the air moves over the basin. It comes lightly, touches the surface and passes on. It does not push against the land. It only travels across mineral plates, low pools, and dark mud, gathering a little scent of salt and dust before fading into the open valley. If you listen from within that imagined quiet, the wind seems to be reading the ground in a language made of touch. The rift walls wait at the edges of the dark, broad and patient. They are not close enough to feel enclosing, but they give the basin a sense of being held. Beyond them, the land rises into high country, where rain may begin its long path downward. Here, in the low floor, that water will eventually become something else, something concentrated, pale, alkaline, and strange. The basin receives the world slowly, and changes it slowly. There is comfort in that slowness, because nothing here is wasted. Even disappearing water has a role. Even a temporary pool matters. Even a faint stain on the crust tells of a past wetness. The Natron Soda Flats Basin turns small events into long traces and long forces into delicate surfaces. It is a place where the immense and the fragile keep meeting quietly, without any need to announce themselves. As the night leans toward its deepest hour, the flats seem almost to widen in the mind. Their pale surfaces stretch beyond sight, and the shallow water becomes a dark softness among them. You may feel as if you are drifting rather than walking, moving without effort from one low shimmer to another. The basin allows that kind of movement. It does not ask for footsteps. It lets attention slide over it like moonlight over salt. Somewhere nearby, a crust may be cooling and tightening. The sound, if there is one, would be tiny, almost imagined, a faint tick from a surface changing shape. The cooling of minerals, the contraction of drying mud, the settling of fine particles, all of it happens with such smallness that the silence remains whole. We stay with that silence, and it begins to feel textured, like a cloth woven from many barely audible threads. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is full of these threads. A thread of groundwater, a thread of seasonal rain, a thread of volcanic minerals, a thread of microbial life, a thread of bird movement. Each one is thin by itself, but together they make the basin's strange fabric. You can picture them crossing under the darkness, not tangled, not rushed, just held together by the shape of the land. The shape of the land is the first quiet container. Without the low basin, minerals would not gather in the same way. Without the closed drainage, water would not concentrate so deeply. Without the surrounding volcanic rocks, the chemistry would not be so unusual. Without the heat and dry air, the pale crusts would not spread so widely. Everything depends on a condition that seems simple only when you say it quickly. But we are not saying it quickly. We are letting each condition take its time. The basin is low. The water gathers. The sun lifts the water away. The minerals remain. Microbes color the brine. Birds follow the food. Crusts crack, dissolve, and return. The rift continues its slow opening. The process is almost a lullaby when it is allowed to unfold at its natural pace. And as we drift along this natural pace, the first suggestion of cooler pre-dawn air begins to settle over the flats. It is not the cold of high mountains or deep winter. It is a gentle thinning of warmth, a small relief after the stored heat of the day. The ground still remembers sunlight, but the memory is fading. The air touches the face with a dry softness, and the mineral scent becomes faintly clearer. In this dim hour, the Natron Soda Flats Basin feels suspended between the night that has covered it and the day that will soon reveal it again. The shallow pools are still dark. The soda crusts are pale without detail. The rift walls are wide shadows. The flamingos, if they are near, remain part of the low distance. Nothing asks to be named, yet everything is quietly present. You may notice how the basin holds color, even when color is nearly gone. The mind remembers the red water under light, the white flats at noon, the pink birds feeding in rows, the black volcanic stone at the margins. Now those colors sleep inside the darkness. They have not vanished. They are waiting for light to touch them again, the way dissolved minerals wait for evaporation to reveal them. Waiting is one of the basin's great moods. Water waits in shallow depressions. Crystals wait at the edge of solution. Birds wait on long legs. Microbial mats wait for the sun. Old shorelines wait to be noticed. The rift waits through ages that are almost impossible to imagine. You can wait too, without restlessness, because here waiting is not empty time. It is part of the making. As a little light begins to gather far off, the surface changes before the sun itself appears. The east may become a muted grey, then a diluted blue, and the flats respond with a softer whiteness. Edges begin to return. A line of crust separates from a line of water. A low ridge becomes visible. The dark basin floor starts to unfold from shadow, slowly, without surprise. The Natron Soda Flats Basin, at this hour, has a tenderness that daytime glare can hide. It is still strange, still mineral, still severe in its chemistry, but the early light makes it seem quiet rather than stark. The soda flats look almost like a pale, sleeping skin across the land. The shallow brine reflects the dim sky with a slight tremble. The air remains cool enough for the senses to linger. You can hear more now, but only slightly. A bird calls once across the water, and the sound travels softly through open space. Another answers farther away. The flats do not echo like a canyon. They let sound spread and thin until it becomes part of the air. The basin keeps its silence even when life begins to stir. Its quiet is large enough to hold movement without being broken. The first feeding motions of flamingos may begin in the shallows. They lower their heads and sweep their bills through the water, filtering the tiny living food held in the alkaline brine. From a distance, their movements are slow, almost meditative. Each bird seems to write a small curve on the surface. The group shifts in a loose pattern, pink shapes in a pale world, following food made by sunlight and chemistry. This is one of the strangest and gentlest truths of the Natron Soda Flats Basin. The birds are not visitors to an empty mineral waste. They are part of an ecosystem built on conditions that would seem unlikely from far away. The alkaline water supports specialized microorganisms. The microorganisms become food. The birds gather. The basin's chemistry rises into feathers and movement, and the whole scene becomes quietly alive. The light continues to grow, and the flamingos begin to show more color. At first they are gray-pink silhouettes. Then the soft rose returns to their bodies, and their reflections appear beneath them in broken streaks. Their legs make fine dark lines in the shallows. Their necks curve with patient repetition. Nothing about them feels hurried. They feed as the basin changes around them, day beginning in a place that never truly stopped. Near the shore, the first Sunday may touch a crusted rim and make it shine. The brightness does not yet overwhelm. It simply reveals. You can see where the surface is smooth and where it has broken. You can see damp patches darkening the flat ground. You can see small rises and shallow basins, mineral plates, powdery skins, and the faint tracks of earlier water. The basin's map returns line by line. The Natron Soda Flats Basin looks as if it has been drawn with a limited palette, but each tone holds depth. White is not merely white. It may be dry soda crust, newly formed crystals, older evaporite, wind-blown powder, or a surface dissolved and remade. Red is not merely red. It may be microbial pigment, concentrated brine, or light passing through shallow water in a certain way. Even the simplest color asks to be entered slowly. As morning spreads, heat begins to gather again, though gently at first. The air loses its pre-dawn coolness. The mineral smell becomes warmer. Pale surfaces brighten. The far edges of the basin become clearer, then begin to soften in the faint shimmer above the ground. You can feel the day's work beginning, the work of evaporation, reflection, warming, and concentration, all starting again without fanfare. And as the day begins its slow ascent, we can turn our attention to the way light itself makes the basin feel stranger. Light on ordinary water may flash and move with waves, but here the water is often shallow, still, and spread across flat ground. It becomes a thin mirror. It reflects sky so completely that the earth seems to open upward. Then a crust interrupts the reflection, and the illusion breaks into pale geometry. In some places, the surface may look like polished metal. In others, it looks like chalk. Elsewhere, it is pink, tawny, brown, silver, or nearly black. The changes can happen across small distances because the basin is uneven in depth, chemistry, sediment, and microbial growth. You might walk with your eyes from one patch to the next and feel as if you are passing through several worlds without leaving the same quiet flat. The Natron Soda Flats Basin uses light to reveal its layered nature. A low sun emphasizes cracks and ridges. A high sun flattens everything into brightness. Cloud shadow can make the flats suddenly softer. Reflected sky can make water disappear into blue. Heat shimmer can lift distant shorelines and make them waver. The place seems still, yet the act of seeing it is always changing. That wavering in the distance can feel dreamlike. The far shore may rise and fade in the heated air. Dark shapes may seem to float above the flats. The line between water and land may blur until the eye stops trying to settle it. This is not a dramatic illusion, only the natural bending of light through warm air, but it adds to the basin's feeling of quiet unreality. You can let the shimmer relax your focus. There is no need to sharpen the far horizon. Let it waver. Let the distant slopes breathe in the heat. Let the pale ground become a little uncertain at the edges. Sleep often begins this way too, with the world becoming less fixed, with thoughts losing their hard outlines, with images flowing into one another like reflections across shallow water. The science of shimmer is simple enough to hold lightly. Warm air near the ground can bend light differently from cooler air above it. Across open flats, especially bright, heated flats, those layers can make distant surfaces appear distorted. The basin's heat and openness create the perfect stage for such soft visual uncertainty. Again, ordinary physics becomes part of the basin's strange atmosphere. At the same time, the reflective shallows add their own illusions. A thin sheet of water can make the sky seem to lie under your feet. The clouds above and the clouds below appear together. A bird walks through both. A crusted ridge interrupts both. The landscape becomes a meeting of surfaces, and you may feel yourself suspended between them, calm and weightless in the brightening morning. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is strange because it shifts between material and mirror. One moment the ground seems hard, mineral, and dry. The next it seems liquid and open. Then the wind moves and the mirror becomes rippled. Then the sun changes angle and the crust shines more strongly than the water. The basin is always itself, but its appearance moves gently with light. As the sun rises higher, the warmth returns to the skin. The air becomes drier. The smell of minerals strengthens in the low places where dampness remains. A faint taste of dust may rest at the back of the throat. You can hear small sounds more rarely now, because the brightness seems to absorb them. The basin becomes a visual world again, wide and pale, but our pace remains slow. We move in attention toward the places where old waterlines mark the edges of former lake levels. They may appear as subtle terraces, mineral stains, or changes in surface texture. A shoreline is not only the present boundary of water, it is also a memory written around the basin. When the lake was higher, it touched one place. When lower, it touched another. The land keeps those touches in pale bands and quiet forms. These former shorelines are part of why the Natron Soda Flats Basin feels ancient. They show that the lake has breathed in and out over time. It has not kept a single shape. It has expanded, retreated, thickened, diluted, colored, crusted, and opened again. Each position of the water left a trace, some faint, some stronger, and together they make the basin feel layered with vanished surfaces. You can imagine standing at one of these old edges, where water may have rested in a different season or a different climate. The ground underfoot is dry now, but it carries the form of wetness. This is a deeply quiet kind of memory. It does not tell a story with voices. It tells it through height, texture, and mineral residue. The basin asks you to read absence as carefully as presence. There is a calm dignity in landscapes that remember without preserving everything perfectly. The old shorelines are not polished inscriptions. They are partial, softened, weathered by wind and new water. Some may be erased. Some may be hidden under newer deposits. The record is not complete, and that incompleteness makes it feel natural, like memory in the mind before sleep, gentle, selective, and fading at the edges. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is shaped by water levels that respond to climate, rainfall, evaporation, and inflow. When more water enters than leaves for a time, the lake spreads. When evaporation dominates, it withdraws. These changes may alter salinity and alkalinity, affecting minerals and life. The basin's strangeness is not fixed in one condition, but held in a moving balance between wetness and dryness. That balance can be delicate. Shallow lakes respond quickly to changes. A small difference in inflow or evaporation can expose broad flats or cover them again. A shift in water level can change feeding areas for birds or alter where minerals form. The system is large in space, but sensitive in its surfaces, like a sleeping face changing expression with a passing dream. As we linger near the old waterlines, the day brightens, but the mood remains low and even. We do not climb, we do not hurry, we let the basin's wide explanations settle around us. The old shore, the present shallows, the future crust, all of them are connected by the same slow motion of water coming and going. In that motion, the place becomes almost tidal, though it is far from the sea, and as we follow the memory of water, we come again to the closed nature of the basin, because this is one of the keys to its strangeness. A closed basin has no regular outward river carrying dissolved materials away. Water may enter, but it usually leaves by evaporation or seepage. In a hot, dry climate, evaporation can dominate, and the dissolved minerals become more concentrated through time. This is the quiet difference between movement and holding. A river valley sends its chemistry onward. A closed basin keeps and transforms it. The Natron Soda Flats Basin holds what arrives until the sun and air remove the water. Then the remaining materials gather into brine, crust, and sediment. The basin is not a passageway. It is a place of settling, and that settling gives it its unusual power. You can feel that power without making it forceful. It is the power of patience. It is the power of a bowl left under the sky. It is the power of repetition, where each wet season adds something and each dry season reveals something. Over time, the effect becomes visible across the landscape. A white floor, alkaline water, rare colors, specialized life. A natural system shaped by retention rather than release. The same principle appears in other evaporating basins around the world, but each one has its own chemistry and setting. Here, the volcanic rift landscape gives the Natron Soda Flats Basin its particular character. Carbonate-rich materials, alkaline waters, strong evaporation, and shallow depth come together in a way that feels distinctive. The basin is not merely dry, it is chemically expressive. That expression appears at the surface as natron and related soda minerals. Natron has been known to people in many places through history, but here we remain with the natural process itself. The mineral mixture forms, where sodium carbonate-rich waters evaporate and leave deposits behind. In the basin, these deposits may join with other salts, sediments, and crusts to create the pale flats we are imagining. The word natron itself feels dry on the tongue, almost mineral. It seems to carry the texture of the place. But the basin is more than its name. It is water becoming mineral, and mineral becoming landscape. It is a lake that writes its chemistry outward, where anyone patient enough can see it. The name helps us enter the process, but the process remains larger than the word. Under the morning sun, the pale crusts may begin to glare again. We soften our gaze. We let brightness spread without resisting it. The basin's whiteness can be intense, but in this narration it stays gentle, as if filtered through drowsiness. You can picture the light not as sharp, but as a white veil over the flats, a veil that reveals and hides at the same time. Heat grows slowly, and with it the evaporation deepens. Molecules leave the surface of the water and rise into the air. The action is invisible, but its results are everywhere. The pool lowers, the brine thickens, the crust widens. A mineral edge grows outward by a small amount. These are tiny changes, but the basin is made of tiny changes repeated through immense time. The Natron Soda Flats Basin invites us to trust small causes. A single afternoon of evaporation may not seem important, but many afternoons shape a shore. A small stream may not seem powerful, but many seasons of inflow bring minerals. A microscopic organism may seem nearly nothing, but a bloom can color water and feed birds. The basin's strangeness is built from quiet contributions that do not ask to be seen individually. You can let that understanding become personal without becoming heavy. Small breaths matter, small releases matter, small moments of stillness gather. Sleep often comes not from one dramatic shift, but from many small softenings. The jaw loosens, the shoulders lower, The thoughts spread out. The room becomes dimmer in the mind. Like the basin, rest is made by accumulation. The light now reaches the volcanic stones at the margins, revealing their dark surfaces and rough edges. Some may be old lava fragments, weathered by heat, wind, and time. They contrast strongly with the pale soda flats. Dark stone, white mineral, red water, pink birds, blue sky. The landscape holds contrasts, but they are arranged with such space between them that nothing feels crowded. This spacious contrast is part of the basin's visual calm. A forest fills the eye with overlapping detail. A reef fills it with movement and color. The Natron Soda Flats Basin gives the eye open fields, strong simple tones, and slow transitions. It does not lack detail, but it places detail low and wide. You can rest your gaze in the emptier spaces and visit the details when you are ready. At the edge of a darker stone, you might see a faint white line where mineral water once touched it and dried. That line is a meeting of rock and lake, of volcanic past and evaporating present. It may be thin enough to overlook, yet it holds the entire basin in miniature. Water arrived, touched stone, carried chemistry, lost itself to air, and left a pale mark. Marks like that make the basin feel intimate despite its scale. The whole landscape is wide, but the signs are small. A crust line on a stone, a mud crack near a pool, a feather resting on pale ground, a band of color in shallow water. These details keep us close to the surface, and closeness keeps the narration soft. We do not need spectacle. We need presence, and as we remain close to the surface, the life of the microorganisms becomes almost easier to imagine. They live not as individuals we can easily picture, but as communities, films, mats, blooms, and color. They respond to salinity, alkalinity, light, temperature, and nutrients. They may grow thickly in some places and thinly in others. Their world is a world of gradients so fine that the human eye sees only the result. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is strange because it makes invisible life visible through hue. A bloom can tint broad shallows. Pigments can turn water red or pink. Darker microbial mats may color mud and shallow edges. These colors are not painted onto the landscape. They are produced by organisms living within it, using the basin's difficult chemistry as their home. When flamingos feed, they join this hidden world. Their bills filter what the eye cannot resolve. They stand in water that may look too alkaline, too bright, too spare, and they draw nourishment from it with patient movements. It is a beautiful connection because it is so specific. The birds are graceful, but their grace depends on microorganisms and minerals, on sunlight and evaporation, on the basin being exactly strange enough. You can watch them for a while in imagination. Heads down, heads lifted, feet shifting slowly through shallow water, reflections bending beneath them. A group turns slightly, and the color changes as their bodies catch the sun. Another group remains still enough to seem like a pink shoreline. Their calls travel low across the flats, softening as they come. The basin holds them without drama. It does not frame them as rare jewels or symbols. It simply supports the conditions they use. That simplicity is soothing. Life here is not sentimental. It is fitted. It belongs because the chemistry, food, water depth, and seasonal timing align. Belonging can be like that sometimes. Not loud, not explained, just a quiet fit between form and place. As the sun continues to rise, the flamingos may spread across feeding areas, leaving more space between groups. Their reflections shorten and brighten. The water around their legs glints. The pale flats beyond them return to strong light. We keep our distance, because distance is part of the peace. Some landscapes and some lives are best received without reaching toward them. The Natron Soda Flats Basin also holds nests when conditions allow, built from mud raised above the surface. These nesting forms are simple, low structures made from the basin's own material. Their existence shows how a place that seems hard from afar can become a delicate breeding ground. Mud, salt, alkaline water, and open space combine into a specific shelter for a specific kind of life. We can picture those nests only gently, without intruding, small rises on the flat, birds standing near them, warm air moving over shallow water, the basin's chemistry helping shape the setting. The quietness here is not emptiness, but care in the form of distance, space, and conditions that many other creatures do not use in the same way. This is another reason the basin feels so unusual. Its protection is not soft in the ordinary sense. It comes partly from difficulty, from alkalinity, from remoteness, from surfaces that are not welcoming to every form of life. The same qualities that make the basin strange also help define its ecological role. Nature often works that way, not by being universally gentle, but by being exact. You may find that exactness calming. The basin is not trying to suit everything. It is simply itself, and within that self, certain lives flourish. A specialized place can hold specialized beauty. The mind does not have to make it broader or easier. It can rest in the precision of it, the way a shell fits one body, the way a bird's bill fits one kind of food. And as the morning grows, the day's heat begins to make the far flats shimmer again. The flamingos become wavering bands. The distant shore loosens. The rift walls seem to breathe through the warm air. The Natron Soda Flats Basin resumes its daylight strangeness, but our attention remains slow, moving beneath the brightness toward the deeper rhythm underneath. That deeper rhythm includes sediment, because the basin is not only salt and soda. Fine particles arrive from erosion in the surrounding landscape. Streams carry silt and clay. Wind carries dust. Volcanic materials weather and break down. These sediments settle in quiet water or lie across flats, mixing with minerals and organic matter. The basin floor becomes a layered combination of many sources. Sediment is the soft archive of the basin. It receives what falls, what flows, what settles, and what remains. In wet places, it may be smooth and dark. In dry places, it may crack and curl. Under mineral crust, it may stay damp longer than expected. Within it, chemical changes can continue, shaped by brine, microbes, and the slow exchange between air and ground. You can imagine a cross-section beneath the surface, though we keep the image simple. Pale crust at the top, damp mineral mud below, fine sediment layers beneath that, older evaporites and lake deposits farther down. Each layer belongs to a different condition, a different balance of water, chemistry, climate, and time. The basin's present face rests on many earlier faces. There is a deep quiet in layered ground. It tells us that the surface is only the latest expression, not the whole story. The Natron Soda Flats Basin may appear open and exposed, yet much of its memory lies hidden below. In this way, it is like sleep again. The visible body lies still, while deeper processes restore, sort, and continue their work in darkness. The sediment also affects the surface texture we see. Clay-rich mud can shrink and crack. Sandy or silty areas may dry differently. Mineral-rich films can harden into crust. Organic mats can bind fine particles. The result is a mosaic of textures, each one shaped by the mixture beneath it. A flat landscape becomes subtly varied underfoot, if you slow down enough to notice. We slow down. We let the eye move over a patch of cracked mud. The cracks are not straight, but they have a natural order. Some are wide, some fine. Some form polygons. Others feather outward from a drying edge. Pale minerals may collect along the cracks, outlining them. The pattern looks delicate, and yet it comes from simple physical stress, as wet sediment becomes dry. Simple forces often make beautiful patterns. Wind moves sand into ripples. Cooling lava forms columns. Drying mud forms polygons. Evaporating brine forms crystals. The Natron Soda Flats Basin holds several of these pattern makers at once. Each one quiet and physical, each one turning change into form. The earth does not need ornament added to it. Its processes already know how to make pattern. As we move farther across the imagined flats, we may pass from cracked mud into a smoother area where a thin mineral film reflects the light. The surface looks almost polished. It may be slippery if wet, powdery if dry, or brittle if crusted over softer sediment. The senses adjust with each step in imagination. A slight shine, a muted crunch, a warmer patch, a cooler dampness near the water. This sensory variety keeps the basin from being empty. It is austere only from a distance. Up close it is full of transitions, and the transitions are where the calm deepens. The mind can rest on one texture, then move to another, without being startled. The whole landscape becomes a slow tactile sequence, felt through imagined feet, hands, breath, and listening. The Natron Soda Flats Basin's strangeness is also connected to scale. Some processes are microscopic, some are regional, some take place in an afternoon, some take millions of years. The basin brings them together on one surface. A microbial pigment and a continental rift both help explain the scene. A drying puddle and a volcanic history both matter. That range of scale gives the place its quiet depth. You do not need to hold every scale at once. You can drift between them. Tiny cells coloring water, a bird filtering food, a crust forming under sun, a basin receiving streams, a rift opening slowly. The mind descends and rises through scale the way it might move through layers of sleep, sometimes near the surface, sometimes deeper, always carried by the same calm rhythm. By now, the morning is bright enough that the open flats might feel almost weightless again. The sky is large and pale blue. The water reflects it in fragments. The soda crusts shine. Dark volcanic stones anchor the edges. The scent of warmth and mineral dust grows clearer. You can sense the day becoming active, though the activity remains quiet, spread through heat, light, and evaporation. And as heat returns, the water's surface begins its invisible upward movement more strongly. Evaporation is often silent, but it is one of the basin's main sculptors. It does not carve like a river. It does not grind like ice. It removes, concentrates, and reveals. By taking water away, it allows minerals to appear. By lowering pools, it exposes flats. By repeating, it turns chemistry into landscape. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is therefore shaped by absence as much as presence. The missing water is part of what we see. The pale crusts are what remains after the liquid has gone. The dry polygons are what remain after mud has shrunk. The strong brine is what remains when fresh inflow has been reduced. The landscape is filled with traces of what has lifted into air. Absence can be peaceful when it is understood this way. It is not emptiness without meaning. It is space left by transformation. The water has not failed the basin by leaving. It has made the basin visible. It has carried minerals, spread them, dissolved them, and then risen. The air holds what the ground no longer does, and the ground holds what the air could not carry. This exchange between earth and air is happening even now. Warm light rests on shallow pools. Moisture rises. Salts wait. A crust widens by the smallest degree. A pool thickens toward brine. The process has no edge where it clearly begins or ends. It is continuous, and that continuity is part of the lull. There is no point where the basin announces a new phase. It simply shifts. We can follow one small pool through the day in imagination. In early morning, it is dark and reflective. By mid-morning, it warms and lightens. By afternoon, it may be shallower, with a brighter mineral rim. Microbes within it may color the water depending on its chemistry and light. By evening, the edge may have changed again, and by another day, the pool may be smaller still or newly filled by rain. A single pool can contain the basin's story in miniature: arrival, reflection, concentration, color, crust, disappearance, return. The Natron Soda Flats Basin repeats this story across a wide floor, each pool and patch at its own stage. The landscape becomes a slow chorus of similar processes, none of them loud, none of them perfectly synchronized, all of them belonging to one broad rhythm. As the day warms, the scent of alkaline mud near damp areas can become more noticeable. It is not the smell of the sea, though there is salt in the idea of it. It is more mineral, more dry, touched by warm sediment and shallow water. The nose receives it as a sign of concentration, of something dissolved and left exposed under the sun. Even scent here carries the basin's logic. The air itself can feel smooth with heat, not heavy, but spacious and dry. It moves over the flats and takes moisture with it. It passes through grasses at the margins and over brine in the center. It crosses the flamingos and the microbial mats, the old shorelines and the volcanic stones. The same air touches each part, then goes on, carrying nothing visible, yet participating in everything. And as we let that warm air move around us, the basin's remoteness becomes part of its atmosphere. The Natron Soda Flats Basin feels far from crowded human noise, even when thought about from a room elsewhere. Its scale and openness create a mental distance from daily demands. The landscape is not empty of life, but it is empty of hurry. That distinction matters, especially for rest. Hurry has no useful place here. If you hurried, you would miss the small mineral lines, the faint color shifts, the way reflections break at crust edges, the calm order of feeding birds. You would see only brightness and flatness. The basin rewards the opposite of haste. It gives more to the softened gaze, the slow listener, the person willing to let strangeness unfold. You are that slow listener now. We move together through the heat without strain, through the pale brightness without sharpness, through the science without weight. The facts are still present, but they are carried by sensation. Closed basin, evaporation, alkaline water, sodium carbonate, microbial color, flamingos, rift valley, volcanic minerals. Each fact becomes a smooth stone placed beside the others. The stones do not need arranging into an ending, they simply rest there. The basin itself is the arrangement. It has already placed everything according to slope, heat, water, and time. We are only noticing, and our noticing becomes slower as the landscape repeats its quiet forms. White crust beside dark water, red shallows under pale sky, birds moving like a gentle thought across the flats. As midday approaches in imagination, the light becomes stronger, and we soften it again by staying low. We look not at the glare of the whole basin, but at the shadow under a curled crust. There the brightness is muted. A thin edge casts a tiny line of shade. Beneath it, the sediment may still hold moisture. The smallest shadow becomes a place of relief, a reminder that even in open brightness, there are quiet pockets. Near that curled edge, crystals may cling in tiny clusters. Their forms are too small to dramatize, but they are exact. Each one grew from solution when the conditions were right. Each one is temporary, yet orderly. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is filled with such small exactness, and small exactness can be deeply soothing because it asks only for close attention, not reaction. If water returns, those crystals may dissolve. Their edges will soften, their structure will disappear into liquid, though the material remains. Later, evaporation may bring it out again in another shape. This is not loss in the basin's language. It is circulation without flow to the sea. It is the movement between dissolved and visible, hidden and revealed, soft and hard. That movement is one of the basin's quietest wonders. Many landscapes are shaped by force you can easily imagine. Waves, rivers, glaciers, landslides, and wind. Here, one of the great forces is a phase change. Liquid water becomes vapor, dissolved mineral becomes crystal, mud becomes crust. These changes are subtle, but over time they build a landscape as distinctive as any carved canyon or folded mountain. The Natron Soda Flats Basin shows that stillness can be active. A shallow pool lying under the sun is not doing nothing. It is changing chemically and physically. A dry flat is not blank. It is a record of evaporation, sedimentation, and crystallization. A red stain is not just color, it is life meeting chemistry. The more we look, the more the stillness becomes full, and as the stillness fills, the mind can empty in a gentle way. It does not empty because there is nothing to think about. It empties because the thoughts no longer need to rush. Each image arrives slowly enough to be received. Each explanation settles into the senses. The basin takes the sharpness out of attention and leaves only a broad, calm awareness. like shallow water spread thinly over a flat floor. The flamingos in the distance may lift and shift, not with alarm, but with the ordinary adjustment of a flock. Wings open briefly, showing deeper color, then fold again. Some birds continue feeding, others stand still, mirrored in the water. Their presence keeps the basin from becoming purely mineral in our minds. They remind us that life can be soft even in places shaped by strong chemistry. A feather might drift near the shore, pale against darker mud. It may catch on a crusted edge or rest on the surface of a shallow pool. Such a small thing, and yet it connects the living bird to the mineral ground. The basin gathers traces from everything that touches it. Water, dust, minerals, feathers, pigments, heat and silence all become part of its low, open memory. As we continue through the day's brightness, clouds may gather far above the highlands, or the sky may remain clear. If clouds appear, their shadows can move across the flats like slow, dark islands. A shadow passing over soda crust changes the whole mood of a patch of ground. The glare dims, the reds deepen, the water looks heavier, then the shadow moves on, and brightness returns. Cloud shadows show us how responsive the basin is to light. Nothing physical may have changed on the ground, yet the place feels altered. This is another kind of strangeness, the way perception participates in landscape. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is chemically unusual, geologically unusual, and visually unstable under changing light. It is a real place that often feels like a mirage, even while every process remains grounded. You can rest in that balance between real and dreamlike. The basin is not imaginary, but it invites imagination because its surfaces confuse familiar expectations. A lake that can look red, a flat that can look snowy under heat, a dry crust that was recently water, a bird colony supported by microscopic life in alkaline brine. These are not fantasies, they are facts with the softness of dreams. The afternoon heat now seems to hover above the flats. We do not push through it, we let it be part of the scene. Heat is not an obstacle in this telling, it is a sculptor, a participant, a slow hand lifting water from the lake. It changes the air, the light, the smell, and the pace of evaporation. It belongs to the basin as much as the salts do. In the strongest light, the white flats can make distance difficult. The eye may lose fine detail. The world becomes simplified into brightness and horizon. This simplification can feel strangely restful when imagined gently. The mind does not need to inspect everything. It can drift across the open tone of the place, allowing details to appear only when they are near enough and soft enough. And as the heat continues, we move in thought toward a shallow inflow where fresher water enters the basin's system. The transition is subtle but important. Water arriving from a stream or spring may carry less concentrated chemistry at first. It can create a local difference in temperature, salinity, or clarity. Then, as it spreads and mixes, the basin begins to transform it, drawing it into the larger alkaline rhythm. At such an edge, the sound of water might be slightly more present, a trickle over stones, a soft runnel through sediment, a small ripple entering a quieter pool. The sound is gentle because the flow is modest, and because the basin absorbs it quickly. You can hear arrival becoming stillness. You can hear movement losing itself into a wider, flatter calm. The Natron Soda Flats Basin receives incoming water without changing its essential character all at once. Instead, it incorporates the water gradually. Dissolved minerals mix, suspended sediment settles, evaporation begins working on the new surface. Microorganisms may respond if conditions fit. The inflow becomes part of the basin's chemistry and pattern, just as a new thought can enter the mind and slowly soften into sleep. The margin around an inflow may support different life than the central brine. Plants may grow where the ground is less alkaline. Small animals may visit. Insects may move near damp edges. These zones are important because they show the basin as a gradient rather than a single harsh condition. The strange center is surrounded by transitions, and transitions often hold the greatest variety. You can picture the edge as a quiet meeting place. Clearer water arrives, carrying the memory of upland rock. Mineral brine waits, warm and concentrated. Mud receives sediment. Salt crust begins farther out. Birds feed where the food is right. Grasses hold the drier margin. Each zone blends into the next. And the landscape becomes a slow sentence with no abrupt punctuation. That lack of abruptness is part of the sleep rhythm here. The basin changes, but mostly by degrees. Wet to damp, damp to crusted, pale to bright, bright to shimmering, fresh to alkaline, living film to colored water, edge to center, morning to afternoon. Your attention moves with those gradients, and because there are no sharp turns, it can keep relaxing as it follows. The Natron Soda Flats Basin teaches the calm of thresholds. It is always between states, water between arrival and evaporation, minerals between dissolved and crystallized, mud between soft and cracked, light between reflection and glare, life between visibility and hiddenness, the listener between waking and sleep. We stay in the threshold, where nothing needs to be forced into completion. As afternoon light begins its slow downward lean, the glare changes again. The basin no longer shines straight upward. Shadows lengthen from small ridges and crust edges. The red tones in the water may grow warmer. Dark volcanic stones regain their shape. The flamingos become more distinct against the pale ground. The day begins, very gradually, to return some softness to the scene. This is not yet evening. It is the long exhale before evening. Heat still rises, but with less insistence. The wind may move more steadily across the flats. The scent of warm minerals remains, but the light is kinder. You can feel how the basin moves through its own daily cycle, from cool pre-dawn to bright heat, and now toward a quieter angle of sun. The cycle of a single day mirrors the larger cycles we have been following: coolness and heat, wetness and drying, reflection and glare, color hidden and color revealed. The Natron Soda Flats Basin repeats itself at many scales, and this repetition gives it a deep calm. A day is a small version of a season. A season is a small version of a longer climatic rhythm. A crust is a small version of a basin-wide process. You may begin to feel that no detail here is isolated. The curled mineral edge belongs to evaporation. Evaporation belongs to climate. Climate belongs to sky, wind, and season. The mineral belongs to volcanic rock and inflowing water. The red pool belongs to microorganisms and light. The flamingo belongs to the red pool. Everything rests inside everything else, but gently, without crowding. And as the afternoon softens, we return to the open center of the flats, where the basin feels most otherworldly. The horizon is low and wide. The ground is pale and patterned. The water lies in thin sheets and shallow pools. The sky fills most of the world. A person could feel very small here, but not in a frightening way. Smallness can be restful when the place around you is patient. In the open center, the absence of trees, buildings, and vertical clutter allows the mind to spread outward. There is little to interrupt attention. The basin becomes almost meditative by form alone. Horizontal surfaces, slow light, faint wind, distant birds, mineral scent, and a wide sky combine into a single low note. You can rest your thoughts on that note and let them become quiet. The Natron Soda Flats Basin's strangeness is inseparable from this openness. If the same chemistry were hidden in a small pond under trees, it would feel different. Here, the chemical landscape is exposed across a broad, open floor. You can see evaporation's work at scale. You can see color spread. You can see birds gather as moving lines. The processes are not enclosed. They are laid bare under the sky. Being laid bare does not make the basin vulnerable in the emotional sense. It makes it clear. The place has very little to hide visually, and yet so much remains invisible until understood. That combination, exposed surface and hidden process, creates a calm tension. You look across the flats and see almost everything. Then you learn that what matters most is partly dissolved, microscopic, underground, or ancient. This is why the basin holds attention without needing drama. The surface is simple enough to soothe, and the processes are deep enough to invite wonder. A sleepy listener can drift with the surface. A waking mind can notice the science beneath. Neither mode interrupts the other. The place offers both, and we move between them like light moving between water and salt. As the sun lowers more, the flamingo's color warms again. Pink becomes rose, then coral in places where the light touches wings and backs. Their reflections lengthen. The water around them darkens slightly. A flock may shift together, and the movement looks like one soft thought passing through many bodies. The basin holds the motion, then returns to stillness. You can hear the flock as a distant murmur, not close enough to wake the senses sharply. The sound is social, low, and continuous in places, with occasional calls rising and fading. It blends with wind over crust and the faint contact of water with mud. The Natron Soda Flats Basin is not silent in an absolute way. It is quiet in a way that lets each sound remain spacious. The rift walls begin to change color again. Brown becomes purple. Purple becomes blue-gray. Shadows gather in gullies and folds. The volcanic stones near the flats darken first on the sides away from the sun. The pale crusts keep brightness longest, glowing softly as the rest of the basin lowers toward evening. The landscape's contrasts become gentle rather than stark, and as evening approaches again, we are not returning to where we began in a circle that closes. We are moving through another layer of the same place. The basin is different now because we have stayed with it through night, dawn, day, and lowering light. Its strangeness has become less surprising and more intimate. The pale flats no longer feel empty. The red water no longer feels impossible. The birds no longer seem separate from the salts. The Natron Soda Flats Basin has entered the rhythm of the body. Its evaporating pools feel like slow breaths. Its crusts feel like thoughts settling into shape. Its microbial colors feel like dreams rising from hidden life. Its flamingos feel like quiet movements at the edge of sleep. Its volcanic walls feel like the older mind of the earth, holding everything without hurry. As the sun nears the horizon, long shadows from tiny features become visible. A crust ridge only a few inches high can cast a dark line across the pale surface. Cracks become more pronounced. Footless pathways of old water show themselves in low relief. The basin's details return with tenderness after the flattening brightness of midday, as if the land is speaking more softly so we can hear it. The smell changes too. Heat no longer lifts from the ground as strongly. Damp mineral places become clearer again. Dry dust cools. The air at the margins may carry a faint scent of grasses and warm stems. The basin gathers evening around each sense, one at a time. Sight softens, smell deepens, sound travels farther, and the skin feels the first loosening of heat. You may feel that loosening in your own body. The shoulders can lower, the hands can unclench, the jaw can rest. Like the basin after the strongest sun, you do not need to hold your shape so tightly. The day can evaporate from you slowly, leaving only what is simple enough to keep: breath, warmth, darkness, and the quiet company of a strange mineral lake. The Natron Soda Flats Basin remains wide around us as the light continues to fall. It does not gather itself into a conclusion. It opens further into dusk, into cooler air, into the same patient cycles that will continue beyond our listening. Somewhere, water is thinning. Somewhere, a crust is forming. Somewhere, microorganisms wait for the next light. Somewhere, birds stand in shallow brine, balanced between reflection and sky. The evening settles across the Natron Soda Flats Basin as if it has been falling all day, arriving grain by grain, tint by tint, until the bright flats are no longer bright, but softly pale beneath the darkening sky. The shallow water holds the last colors without trying to keep them, rose becoming gray, silver becoming black, and the long reflections of distant birds thinning into the same quiet that holds the volcanic walls. You can let the basin keep its mysteries now, The alkaline water will go on concentrating under future suns. The crusts will dissolve and form again. The red shallows will wake with light, and the flamingos will follow the food that rises from the smallest living things. None of it needs your attention to continue, and that is part of its peace. The ground cools slowly under the night. Pale mineral plates rest over darker mud. A faint, dry wind moves across them and then fades. Far away, one last bird sound travels over the flats, softened by distance until it is almost not a sound at all. The Natron Soda Flats Basin lies open under the stars, strange and still, held by the rift, held by salt, held by time. Your breath can become as slow as the water leaving the lake, as soft as dust settling on a crusted shore. The day has thinned out. The colors have lowered. The wide basin asks nothing now, and far above it, the sky goes on turning, while down here there is only pale earth, quiet brine, and the gentle dark resting over everything.